kind, too
Yeah,
kind.
nice to meet you. Um,
Yeah, likewise, likewise. Thanks for having me.
yeah, absolutely. So we're gonna have other people join us. Like you said, you wanted to
Mhm.
do like a panel type situation. So
Yep.
I'll open it up. But first, I want to talk to you a little bit and introduce you to the stream and to myself. So we so this is a talk on systemic racism, right?
Mhm.
And I think it's a thing. Uh, this my friend here disagrees a little bit, but we'll have a discussion on that. Yeah, and we were put together by a mutual acquaintance, Doobie, right? And
Dewey.
yeah. And so they said that you'd be a fantastic person to talk to, and so shout out to my man Doobie out there. So yeah, let's tell the stream about yourself, right? Introduce
Mm.
yourself, maybe where they can find you, and yeah, we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure thing. So, my name is Kai Schwemmer. I go by Kai.Clips online. You can find me at cozy.tv/Kai.Clips, where I'm streaming right now. Not to say you should go away from this channel, because it's very good stuff with great panel content. But if you do want to find me afterwards, you can find me streaming there. And if you come over during the show, hopefully the chat won't berate you or anything. I'm on YouTube as well. You can just search up Kai.Clips, Kiclips, and on Instagram too. Somebody took the name with the C, so it's Kaiklips, no spaces or dots or nothing.
Okay. Um,
And I'm just a conservative, is what I would call myself.
yeah. Okay. So uh, nothing any more specific, right? Paleo conservative or I don't know. There's
Yeah.
more than that. I can't think of anything right
Yeah,
now.
it's almost part of the debate a little bit, to like the whole game of like, what do you call yourself? But I think that calling yourself anything but what you want the label to mean is kind of useless. So I believe what I believe is the most close to the actual definition of conservatism. I think people have changed it to lean more libertarian or classically liberal.
Okay. All right. So uh, uh just I guess well, the best thing to do is to start by giving just a bit of an overview as to what your views are when it comes to systemic racism, right? We'll go from there. I'll start letting other people in, right, and we'll do a whole thing.
Perfect, perfect. Do you want me to just get started with like what my views are?
Yeah, please.
All right, epic. So I do not agree with or believe kind of the typical narrative about systemic racism, saying that black people in America today face either the same kind or any kind of systemic racism that they have historically faced, either with Jim Crow laws or with slavery, especially, which I think the evidence would show has very little effects on the descendants of slaves versus the descendants of free black people. I do believe that systemic racism is starting to exist more nowadays. Unfortunately, I don't believe systemic racism should exist, but I think it is starting to exist in either academia with affirmative action, or just generally with kind of an anti-white animosity. So it might sound like really contrarian, but I'm sure you guys see all kinds of characters from all over the political aisle. So it's not the first time you've heard somebody say that anti-white racism exists. But that's basically where I stand on it.
Okay, so you believe anti-white racism is a thing.
Mm,
You believe racism in terms of interpersonal is a thing,
mm.
but you don't think that it is something infused within our institutions, and something that plays itself out on a macro scale.
Yeah, I think the framing basically of systemic racism has kind of effectively carried on, but I don't think that systemic racism exists the same way against black people now that it historically has. And I think that the continued narrative about systemic racism existing against black people in that way is allowing for the propagation of anti-white discrimination, because it's not so much a victim complex. It is a little bit, but more so a perpetrator kind of complex. So whites are the infinite aggressor and the infinite like culprit.
Right? So okay, so you think it's a victim mentality. Whites tend to be the infinite aggressor, and that they can always
Framed that way, I would say.
frame that way. Okay, framed as the infinite aggressor. Um, and are minorities, not just African Americans, but are minorities, uh, do you think they're let off, right, for their either bad behavior or like bad choices, and that those choices aren't maybe affected by like a wider history or a societal predetermined societal outcomes?
Yeah, so I'm not like a determinist, so I don't believe that people, have their entire life outcomes decided by where they're born. I think lots of the typical narrative tries to explain away some of the negative behavior from certain groups of whatever race. I think it's something that white people can't really get away with. And it's something that, black people can get away with. I wouldn't say that they necessarily argue for it, but it's argued onto them by, I'd say, white liberals or leftists or whatnot, which is where the argument comes in about like, well, if I think I recall hearing the Vosh clip about, maybe there's differences in, or there's a disparity in crime rates because of the metal in the water or something to that effect, which seems almost ludicrous looking at the fact that, a $20 Amazon water filter would filter out any kind of, really statistically significant effect on IQ or on the ability to comprehend consequence. So I think that white liberals often argue these exceptions onto minorities, and white people just obviously can't use the same excuses. White people, although they are often born into poverty, can't really use the poverty excuse as much as a black American could per se.
Hmm. Hmm. Um. Okay, I got some people who are begging to come in, right? Like you wanted a panel, so I'll let you have a panel because I'm more than willing to do this myself. But I'm gonna bring in some people, right? And, so what I'll do, I'm gonna make this a private panel. By that I mean to my audience, I'm going to be bringing in people specifically on because we only have one darling conservative here, right? And so
It's that controversial.
we
You
got it.
can't open up the floodgates. They're gonna tear me apart. No.
Yeah.
If you want to open it up, I'm comfortable with that too.
Yeah. But guys, if you're not in here yet, don't worry. I'm gonna be bringing in more people. So like, don't like just leave just because you aren't currently in here, right? So I'm just bringing people a few at a time. We'll have that discussion. So if you're watching this, stick around, please. Thank you. All right. We have two great people here who I both appreciate. We have Wick. Hello, Wick. Thanks for being here, a friend.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited to engage. It'll be an interesting topic, interesting discussion.
Okay,
Hey,
great.
likewise.
And then also we have the wonderful Stardust, who seems
Hi.
like she's ready to go. Love to see it, Stardust. So yeah, if you guys have anything you want to say to our friend Kai here, then jump on in. If not, then I can try to start things off.
Sure. Nice to meet you. So I only caught part of it. So I guess what is your opinion on the I guess criminal justice system?
I think that if I were given the choice to choose, and I don't want this to sound uncouth or overly contrarian, but I think that when we're talking about criminal justice, I'm usually more worried about violence than I am about excessive force. So I think lots of the framing surrounding either police shootings or anything else
Yeah.
should be contextualized first with criminality. And I think in 99% of cases, it can be explained away, or rather could have been prevented when criminality didn't occur. If we look at cases like, for instance, with George Floyd or with, Trayvon Martin or Ahmaud Arbery, many of these cases, I don't even think Ahmaud Arbery's case was specifically because of a history of violence. But coincidentally, when we look at any of these characters who have been put into the mainstream because of either police shootings or excessive use of force, almost every single time, coincidentally somehow, there is a history of violence or crime. And I think that the crime is more important to address than the excessive use of force.
So I think we're looking at two different parts of the criminal justice system. So when I think about systemic racism, I think about how the criminal justice system functions with that. I'm not really thinking about George Floyd or Ahmaud Arbery. What I think about are the four places in which you like the 4 steps in which somebody is when there's the cop citation, then there's the prosecutor charge, then the court starts, and then the judge sentences. And majority of the bias that you can see in the criminal justice system happens in the first 2 parts of that. So the cop citations or the police stops, and then the prosecutor charges. So you'll find that there's a lot of data to support that police stops are disproportionately done on people of color, and then you'll find that for prosecutor charges that minorities in general may receive harsher punishments because prosecutors are more likely to apply mandatory minimums to them. So these are 2 places where you can look at like very, very specific cases of actual bias within the criminal justice system that would affect groups of color disproportionately.
Now, you
And
also
so,
mentioned something really quickly, and just to kind of clarify, because I'm confused a little bit. So you mentioned
Mhm.
you do not want to concentrate on excessive force. You're more concerned about violence. How is excessive force not a form of violence? Because a lot of these problems come is in there's studies to show it. I can find them for you and link them in the voice chat and link them in there. They're pretty clear that while I will say that there is a lot of evidence. The evidence of whether cops shoot black people more inconclusive, but the evidence that they brutalize minorities more is very clear. It's very clear. And so, how is that not violence when you have a group cops using excessive force and brutalizing groups to like more so than other groups? That's to me seems like a systemic issue, is it not? It may not be because the cops are racist, but because of the way policing is handled in those communities and the policies in place, it leads to them being excessively violent towards these groups. How is that not violence? I want to see the disconnect here. I'm trying to close the gap.
That's Kai.
yeah, sorry. My internet's already starting to stutter a little bit, so hopefully it doesn't get too bad. But I'd say
If so, 1 second, what region are you in? Maybe I can change the region in terms of Discord, and maybe that might be helpful to you. Like you in the West Coast, East Coast of the states, or Canada? I'm not sure where you're from.
Midwest, West Coast. I'm in Utah.
Okay, you're in West Coast. All right, that's U.S. West. Okay, well, we could try something else later on if this doesn't work. Keep going.
Yeah, no worries at all. So, I'll kind of respond first to Wick. The thing you kind of started with, it's like this punchy kind of rhetorical, like politician line. It's like, well, if you're talking about the problem with violence, isn't police violence also violence? It's like, sure, but not all violence is the same. You know, there's a difference between the unjust taking of a life and the just taking of a life. And I'm not contextualizing it to say that all police killings are the rightful taking of a life. I'm not saying that, but it is to say that the police violence, I would say 99% of the time, occurs after criminality. If the criminality vanished, there would likely be far less police violence and maybe even a statistically negligible portion. I'd like to see some of your statistics about
Sure, I'll pull them up here.
brutalization of black people. But even then, I would be surprised if those statistics measured, brutality used on black people and controlled for how many of those instances began because there was a crime committed. Again, I am not defending the acts of certain police officers, but if you're gonna, frame the conversation to be more concerned with the with the overuse of force, well, that use of force wouldn't have even occurred had there not been a reason to dispatch an officer, were there not like a report, and had a crime not been committed in most cases, of course with exceptions to the rule. But to start us, your point, if I can ask you about one thing, what's your take on mandatory minimums? What's your opinion of them, just generally?
I'm not sure. I know that they are disproportionately done on people of color and minorities. and that there's tons of studies, data to back it up, where African Americans are more likely to receive like 3-strike sentences than white people, and Latinos are more likely as well. I do think that there is an issue when we have this very clear like disparity, right? And it's not just in like one spot within the criminal justice system. A lot of people make the mistake of assuming that it happens like in sentencing, but we actually can look at sentencing and see that it's actually it tends to be it doesn't start there, right? If you look at sentencing alone, generally like it seems to be okay. It's where mandatory minimums come into place. That's where they're way more likely to apply a mandatory minimum towards a person of color. And then similarly, when there's traffic stops are much more likely to be done for people of color in certain communities, just because of the communities that police tend to patrol, and I guess they just tend to stop people more. There's data even to show that just let's see here. Even when let me see here. I have my thing here. Black drivers are 20% more likely to be pulled over than white drivers, even though they're less likely to possess contraband. This likelihood drops after dark when it's less easy to tell the race of a driver. So, I mean, there's like very concrete evidence that will back that up. So, yeah. I don't know if you have
So
anything.
yeah, I'm familiar with the after I forget what the study's called, but the nighttime
Here, I
study.
can link it. I can link it. Yeah.
No, I'm familiar with it. I'm familiar with it.
Okay.
Could you send me that
And
study,
one,
Stardust?
Yeah, I have 2 things actually I'm linking, and I will at you.
Thank you.
Prime. Yeah.
Yeah, just put it in VC chat. Okay, please go ahead, Kai.
Yeah, so there's a few things. I mean, with the nighttime study, it's an interesting one. I think it's less a case of profiling and more just people are being pulled over less, especially at night, and so obviously proportionally it's going to decrease too. That's kind of like this kind of one-off study, and I think see. I don't know. I don't want to be like, I don't really like the study, but I think it's more important to kind of assess the I don't know what you'd call it, kind of like the thesis argument that you're making, which is like certain communities are over patrolled. And I do think that, black people are likely pulled over more and are likely frisked more and are stopped more because they live in communities that are over policed. Most of the time, though, the reason that communities are over policed is because there is a disproportionate level of violence. They did this in New York City. And when people were having the whole debate about the Bloomberg situation with stop and frisk, one of the things that actually was instrumental in decreasing the amount of crime was in creating crime heat maps. So they would figure out where most crime was happening, and they would have more officers patrolling these locations. These locations were largely, minority neighborhoods where the crime was being committed. I'm not making a claim as to whether it's because of them being poor or being minorities or whatever, but what's relevant is that crime is occurring. They are red hot on the crime heat map, and because of the heat of the crime, they have police dispatched to those locations. Now,
Yeah.
do you see any problem with sending police to places where more crime is occurring? Because I think this is an effective way of
Where
dealing
my
with
problem
it.
comes in. Where my problem comes, real quick.
Let's
Okay,
Stardust
sorry.
and then Wick.
Yeah. So I don't necessarily have a problem with that. However, the study that I specifically cited shows that despite the fact that black drivers are less likely to possess contraband, they are 20% more likely to be pulled over. And you can look at stats from all over the country. 46% of the population of DC is black, but they represent 72% of stops. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I just got raided. Thank you for the raid. I think I tagged you guys. There's a gap in search rates even between black and white drivers. It's 2.4%, and then Hispanic and white drivers, it's 2.2%. Sure, there may very well be places where there is more crime and there needs to be more patrolling, but that doesn't account for the fact that Black people were still less likely to possess contraband in that study that I was citing. So I also would say that it is not just one thing, right? There's the citation, which we are talking about right now, but also the prosecutor charges with a mandatory minimum. So, yeah.
Wick, do you want to go ahead?
Oh, sure. I mean, it's a little difficult. I think
Sorry,
me and
Wick.
Stardust are coming at this from separate angles. We didn't get to any time to,
I'm
talk
so sorry.
beforehand.
Coordinate a
No,
plan
Hey,
of
you
attack.
and me both.
but
You and me
but
both.
but
You
it's
don't
fine.
have me citing a bunch of studies,
It's
by the
fine.
way, just
It's fine.
because I didn't
I
have
get it.
my
It's
didn't
all
pull
good.
up a
It's all
folder
good.
or
I
anything.
understand. Though I did
I'm a
put
nerd.
my
I'm
sources.
sorry. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I put my sources in the VC chat if you'd like to check them out. But we talk about this in you're so close to it. You're so close because yes, communities are policed more. There are more violence in certain communities than others for a multitude of factors. But the fact remains that the policing of these communities are done with more brutality, with more force, with more, um, you know, disrespect, for lack of a better term. And we see this again and again and again. And it's creating this kind of cycle of animosity because then the communities don't trust the police, which creates bad interactions. And as you said, and as Stardust has mentioned, minorities get pulled over more. They interact with the police more. So just with that, it makes sense that even if there was no racism involved, because they're interacting with the police more, they're more likely to have a bad interaction. Just that's the law of numbers. That's the law of statistics. So we can look at these things. So when we talk about systemic racism, I think it's really important to understand that systemic racism doesn't require any of the actors to be actually racist, which is why it bothers me when people start saying, well, this guy was racist or this guy was racist. It doesn't matter. Everyone could be angels from heaven with not a racist bone in their body, but because the system is designed in a certain way, it disproportionately has negative effects on communities of color. And we can see this through statistics. We can see this through just a wide variety of data sources. And I've linked a few. I'm not an expert in this field by any means. So I think part of the problem when talking to people is they feel I'm accusing them of being racist. I'm not.
Yeah, I
I
get that. I get it.
But we have to recognize that there is a real problem that's disproportionately affecting these communities because if we don't recognize the actual problems, then we can't fix them. And these policies, the war on drugs, for example, is a terrible policy that has disproportionately hurt Black people. The 1990s criminal bills that were passed disproportionately affected Black communities. And this is an issue that we have to it's a real issue. It's hard to it's hard to kind of see the fact like I just don't see why you're not seeing it, if that makes sense. Because like again, I'm not saying you're racist, you shouldn't feel guilty or anything. You didn't put these laws into place. But to acknowledge the fact, I don't see why that's a problem.
Yeah, so well, there's a few things to unpack there, and I promise Stardust I'll get to your point too. I'll kind of like bounce back and forth, and we'll open up different avenues of discussion. I think you've kind of developed this kind of chicken and the egg thing, which is that well, Stardust at least agrees. I don't know if you agree that these communities are being over policed because there is a disproportionate level of crime. We talked about like the heat maps. By the way, the heat maps work. The heat maps decreased crime throughout New York,
Well, certainly,
and
I'm not saying that they
yeah.
shouldn't be policed or
Well,
I
no,
I'm
I
not
understand that. I
I
understand that.
stipulate to that. Fine, I'll
Yeah,
stipulate.
yeah. And then for you, it becomes, well, but then they have a lot of run-ins with police where there's brutality. Well, my argument is there's probably usually brutality when people are either avoiding arrest or when criminality is taking place in the first place. So you can find me like there's a lot of people who have had absolutely no crimes done against them who are being brutalized by police. I'll be more sympathetic to that. But just to say that, these
So
people
do you
are being,
think
well, hold on.
I understand. Okay.
Just to say that these people are being searched and they haven't committed a crime is not saying that the people who are being searched are being brutalized and have committed no crime or have
So
nothing on
do
them.
you think because someone commits a crime,
Mhm.
that they are not entitled to not being brutalized? Let's use that word. So
I think I
because you
answered this
go
in my
and say,
opening statement.
I may have missed it, so please again.
Yeah, I don't think they are. I don't think that that is something they've earned is a violent treatment. I don't think the violent treatment of them is right. But if I'm tasked with either defending criminality or rather, if I'm tasked with being angry at criminality or being angry at an excessive use of force, I'll be angry about the criminality because when the criminality disappears, the
Why is this an
necessity
either
for the
or?
use of the necessity for the use of force disappears along with it. There is
Okay, but
no,
why is this an either or? Like, why can't you be like, man, crime sucks. I agree, crime sucks, and also at the same time say, and yet we shouldn't brutalize criminals.
Well, that is what I say. The problem is that
But
you've
you keep framing. No, you don't. You keep framing this as either or. I don't know if you're
um
intentionally do this, but you do.
no,
You frame
I
this as either or. You like, if you task me with this or this, I'll choose to be angry at criminals every time. You just said that.
absolutely
Exactly.
because
That's creating a binary. That's creating a false binary.
and I can explain my reasoning for that if you'll give me some ground trying
Sorry,
to
I
impede
tend
into
to
the
like myself
conversation.
talking. So go
Hey,
ahead.
no worries. I was honestly surprised. No insult to you, but you have more of an effeminate way of articulating. So I was surprised that you
With
are
my fucking manly
conversationally,
beard
you,
here,
you are
like
you are
I'm effeminate
conversationally
with my
so
beard of
so
strength.
assertive. And there's a
Oh,
few
okay.
ways that you
Okay.
kind of curb the assertiveness, which is like passing the olive branch of well, I don't think you're racist. I have this nuanced view of systemic racism, which again I understand that perspective. It's not my first day on the block around the systemic racism debate. I know for sure, like with a lot of like neocons or like the typical Republican, they'll assume you're calling them racist. I understand the nuance of the definition. But the reason I make it into this dichotomy is because that's really how it's framed. Every single time one of these cases gets pulled up, for instance, with the Jacob Blake shooting, the framing was, well, 7 bullets was too much for Jacob Blake. Well, the ultimate reality of every single time there is an excessive use of force with with a criminal or whatnot, which again, I'm not saying they are deserving of excessive use of force, but every single time that happens, an absence of criminality would have completely made the excessive use of force an impossibility. And so that's the reason it's dichotomous, because it's not as much dichotomous as it is it follows, right? The logic follows. Once there is criminality, there is the opportunity for the excessive use of force. It's not so much a dichotomy as it simply is the logical train.
I get it. I get what you're saying, but again, we're excusing these things
I
because
just want to
just because.
say,
Oh, go ahead.
yes, Wick, I think you are very manly. So
I
I just want
appreciate
you to
that.
know.
I think
I
so too.
appreciate
Yeah.
that. I'm
Don't
just
worry.
me. It is
Um,
what it is. I don't want to get sidetracked on that, but I do want to really point this out because you're excusing, like, simply because, like, I'll give you maybe another example. I hope this isn't too off topic, but if someone comes up and slaps me, that doesn't mean I automatically have to slap back. I can make the choice to say, "Wow, that person violated my space. It did something bad to me. It hurt me in some way." I don't I am not, like, it doesn't follow immediately that I am forced to
that's
respond
a pretty
with
feminine
violence
response,
back.
to be honest, though. But go ahead.
Say it one more time.
That's a pretty feminine response, but to be honest.
It's
If I
like,
slap somebody,
okay, I'm
I'm sorry.
wow,
I'm sorry,
really getting
Wick. I
off. We're
apologize.
getting off the rails here. I'm just
I
saying that you do
apologize.
not have to respond with equal or excessive force. And in my belief, and this is just me here, I'm very much for harm reduction. To use the minimum amount of force necessary in any situation to keep things at an even keel. I understand that policing is a necessary thing, that we have to do it. But I think that we need to be minimizing the force used in as many situations as possible. Because even though these criminals are breaking the law, they still are human beings. We believe in the Bill of Rights, right? We believe they have the right to various,
I agree with
due
all this. Yeah.
process, fair trial. So again, when that right is not being given to a specific group, that is a problem. And again, it has to do with the policies we have in place, the way we train our police officers, the fact that we don't use community policing as much as we should. There are steps we can take. There are steps right now that we can take to end the war on drugs, for example, is a really good one. I think maybe we could reach out and agree with that to end the war on drugs. Maybe not, given your reaction. But there are steps we can take that will reduce the violence towards these groups. So why not take them? Where is the cost? Why oppose this?
Yeah, I think the kind of rhetorical characterization you set up of the issue is actually something that I would use, and I believe in kind of that force reduction or the harm reduction to some extent. The difference is that if you already have agreed that the opportunity for an excessive use of force follows criminality, then you are making a choice to assess or to care more about stopping an excessive use of force versus stopping the original, aggression, which is, of course, the slap. So if we stop people
policing
slapping,
doesn't-
well, hold on,
we
hold on,
under-
hold
we
on, hold on,
understand. Policing doesn't
hold on a
stop
minute,
crime.
hold on a minute, though. Well, I disagree. I mean, we just mentioned the heat waves. Literally just being in communities that are more prone to violence is a deterrent to violence because you look at police officers who are going to catch you who commit crimes. It was very effective in New York.
But again,
And so,
we agree that these over-policed communities, the crime is higher there. And
yes,
what you're
because there's
saying,
more
if
police who find the crime. Yes.
if police stop crime, it would follow that that would be lower, that the crime would go down. But it
Well,
doesn't. In fact, we see the opposite occurring.
I
Right?
am not at all surprised that when police are dispatched to places where we assume there is more crime or where we have heard there is more crime, that there will be more reported incidents of criminality. I am not at all surprised that police are going to file reports that crimes are being committed in places where we have dispatched police to deal with crimes. It's not surprising whatsoever. What it's telling us is that we are effective in locking up people who have actually committed crimes. So again, just to get back to this chicken and the egg. What I'm trying to do is adequately punish people.
I would like to, so I actually would like to interject here because
Yeah, sure
I
thing.
don't think that we are actually locking up people and giving them fair sentences. Like I said, mandatory minimums are disproportionately applied towards people of color. Minorities in general receive harsher punishments than white people do because prosecutors are more likely to apply mandatory minimums to them. So even if we have these scenarios where, yes, the neighborhood has more crime, the neighborhood has, what you're talking about with the heat map, and therefore they have dispatched more police there, we still have the fact that regardless of that, we see that based on the statistics that there is a disparity between black and white drivers and how much they're stopped, and this is taking into account with the neighborhoods, right? And then we still have the fact that there is a disparity in the harshness of the sentence that we see is given to a criminal of color. And the reason for that, again, is not because the judge is biased. It's not because of the court. It is specifically when the prosecutor brings the charges. They are far more likely to give a mandatory minimum.
Can you send me that source about the disparity
Sure.
in the sentencing? So there's a few variables that I want to see if they're in there. It's very difficult to
Absolutely.
do this kind of research. So if there's not those variables, obviously I'll be like, oh, I don't really like that the variables not included. But of course, it's not totally damning. It's just very difficult to do the research,
Sure
which I
thing.
think a lot of people don't understand.
I will drop the links to you. Just give me a minute here, and then I guess you and Wick can continue your
Did you just call me
conversation.
weak, Wick? What's going
No,
on?
no
Oh,
problem.
What's
Yeah.
happening?
I'll keep monologuing for a bit. Again, I think you guys accuse me of making this dichotomous, but everything I've ever heard from a
I didn't
leftist
accuse
has
you of anything.
well, no,
Damn.
not you,
Oh,
Stardust.
I have.
More so Wick. So you can accuse me of making this a dichotomous issue, but
I'm not
really,
accusing you. I'm observing. I'm pointing it out. That's all. Go on.
so what would you call the assessment of an observable thing? Be an accusation
An
of it, right?
observation. That's what an observation is. You
Fair
observe
enough.
something, because if I just noted it, it wouldn't be an observation. Observing implies that I tell you that I make
Fair
the
enough.
observation.
Fair enough. Well, either way, you have observed me creating a dichotomy, and that is because, like I said, criminality and an excessive use of force are two steps, and the obsessive use of force relies on the former criminality. So the interesting thing to me is that in every single conversation about criminality, about excessive use of force, about any kind of like the violence by police or the disparity in sentencing, the thing that people are more concerned about generally And of course there are exceptions. There's kind of like proactive, like community policing and whatever. I kind of doubt the effectiveness of that. But the thing I always hear, and the framing and the rhetoric that I always hear is, well, people who have committed these crimes are getting mandatory minimums, or people who are, committing crimes are getting sentenced too long. And to me, again, I will always be more upset at the fact that the crime is committed than that somebody has received excessive justice. And I'm not even saying that out of like I
I
believe that
understand,
the
and you could be
justice that
more
they're receiving.
upset, and that's fine.
Mhm.
But
So
that
why are
doesn't
you not?
change the fact. Why am I not more upset?
Yeah,
Even if
why are
I
you not
was
more
more
upset
upset,
about the crimes being committed
because
than you are upset with the overuse of force?
okay. So when it comes down to it, that we vote, we have an electoral system in this country, in America, and I have some say in what policies are put in place. I can vote on my sheriff in some instances. I have a say. I have the ability to affect it, even if it's minutely, because I'm simply one voice. So I have a say there. I have some level of control over that. Whereas someone committing a crime, I do not get to decide what they do. I have very little influence in what they do. So the sphere of influence I have, where I can control, is where I spend most of my issues and most of my time and energy, I should say, because that is what I can do. And yes, ideally, we would reduce crime, which would reduce excessive force. But because crime isn't going to go away anytime soon, so we can
But the people who
change these
commit it can be locked
policies.
up. And I
That's
think that's a
fine.
big part
If
of it.
I
And
am
and
not a, I am
there's a
not a
big
prison
there's an
abolition. Let
epidemic
me finish. Let me
of
finish.
repeat
I'm not a
offenders.
prison abolitionist. I am
I
not a
didn't say
prison
you were. I'm just
abolitionist.
saying that
I
it's
think,
effective to put people in jail who commit
but
crimes. We see
the
all
problem is,
kinds
like, I'll give you an
of
example.
recommittal.
I'll
I
give
mean,
you a very
what
specific
I'm
the
sorry.
example. I'll give you an
rates of
example. So just let me
re-entry
finish.
So,
into
Just
prisons is
one second,
huge.
one second. We'll get back to you, Kai. We'll finish your point, then
okay,
back to
sure.
Kai.
So you mentioned putting him in jail, locking him up. So we have a system in place where if you get a traffic ticket or a parking violation and a fine, and this is a real problem, and especially in poor communities, they can't pay it. They simply cannot afford to pay that. So they get more and more in debt. It becomes harder and harder to pay it. And eventually they are sent to jail. This creates a a lot of animosity in a community towards policing.
All right, what's
People
the
don't want
first
to work
step?
with
What's the
them.
first step?
What's the first step?
What was the thing that happened that
Okay,
created that cycle?
again, society cannot control what people do, but they can
No,
control
but
how they respond to
this
it.
is the
You are
problem.
trying.
This is the
Oh,
problem.
this is silly. You're being
No,
silly.
I don't think
Stop
it's
being
silly at
silly.
all. I'm
You're being
asking for
silly. You're missing the
responsibility from
point. And
individuals. I
I
think
cannot
this
tell
is
if you
the
are being dishonest or you really do not get it. I really cannot tell.
well, I certainly
I'm trying to give you the benefit of the doubt here. I try to give you never ascribe to malice what can be ascribed to incompetence. But again, you keep harping on this point as if it invalidates the wrong done further down the line, which again, in an electoral system, we have more say over. Is it not getting through? Is it
No,
I don't
no,
know.
it's getting through. I just think that you've shut yourself off from stopping the problem at its root.
How?
Well,
How
I'm
can
about
we
to explain. I'm about to explain. You'll find that I actually go to explain most of my points when I'm not cut off in the middle of them. But the way you've even characterized this, the way you've contextualized the idea of being able to, help things further down the line or being able to do something electorally, I mean, you've shut yourself off from the ability to stop crime preemptively or at least to ask for more responsibility. You are looking at the world and saying that, crime and these criminal acts are something that are a character of it. And while I believe that, man in his fallen nature is more prone to doing things which are wrong and is more prone to, certain negative outcomes, certainly he has autonomy. He can control himself. And maybe the answer is asking people to control themselves better or putting them in situations like we've illustrated with the heat maps in New York, where they are rather not going to commit crimes because they
You aren't
understand
addressing a single one
those
of my
crimes are
points, my
going to be
friend.
caught. Well, hold on. I'm not addressing your
It's
points
okay.
yet because
Artist can
you started towing around the line of almost attributing either incompetence or, kind of malintent to me. So I want to kind of tell you, you have the opportunity electorally to argue for preemptive moves to stop crime.
Sure.
But you did
Do that.
not lead the conversation with, well, what if we propose heat maps? Or what if we actually, put more people who have
Because that's
committed
not our
crimes in.
point of
Well, hold on.
disagreement. That's not our
Hold on.
point of disagreement.
Guy-
No, but
Okay.
it
Kai,
is.
cool.
It
Kai,
is.
Kai, finish, please.
Yeah, it is our point of disagreement because you have never once started a conversation telling me what things we can do to reduce crime. All you've told me repeatedly is that, oh, you can't just make crime go away. Of course. But what we can do is make people who commit crimes repeatedly go away. We see so much recidivism with criminality, and making these people go to jail is obviously not my favorite outcome in the world. Jail's a very bad place, but it's absolutely something that would stop harm from being done. So if you're going to talk to me about, reducing the amount of force that's being used, the force that's infinitely worse than police brutality or the brutalization of people, which again, I don't believe is earned, is the force of, I don't know, assaulting somebody in the first place, stealing somebody's car, or even, stopping somebody from,
When have I ever
doing a
when have I
parking
ever
violation.
disagreed with that? When have I ever disagreed with that?
I think
When have I ever
you,
said,
you don't
when
even
have I
need to.
ever said when have I ever said that we cannot do things like heat map? You act as
I'm
if
about
we've
to.
had a lot of conversations before. This is our first time talking. We've been talking for about what, 20 minutes now? So yes, the fact that I haven't started with a point that we agree on, because this is a time and place to disagree. And so I picked the point of disagreement. I think, yes, there are plenty of things we can do to reduce crime. And in fact, I would argue that reducing police brutality will reduce crime. Communities will be more likely to cooperate with police, and this will create a better way to actually do policing. Community policing works. When communities cooperate with the people who are policing them, it will have an effect of reducing crime.
Can you show me an example of that? And then I want to look at where the
I don't
example
have
was
I
taken
don't have
from.
it out of my pocket, my friend. I don't have
If
a
you can
specific
find one,
one.
that would be useful. Because what I would also assume is that the example of communities coming together to help police themselves is usually done in very high trust communities where crime happens not to be a systemic issue. And I'm not attaching a race or an identity to any of that. I'm simply saying it's probably a suburban area, which is relatively economically well off, that happens to be able to police itself very well. The reason for that is because there's a lot of preemptive things. There's a sense of responsibility in these communities. There is a sense of caring about the people you're around. There's not a culture of violence in these communities. And certainly the
You're not
people who are
addressing
in
any
these,
of my points,
hold
my
on,
friend.
hold on. Certainly the people in these communities are not committing crimes to perpetuate a cycle of poverty. When we're talking about the entire conversation of
His take was so bad the internet killed it.
Apparently. Let's give him a moment. He said he was
Okay,
having problems.
in his
Federal
moment,
prosecutors are twice as likely to charge African Americans with offenses that carry a mandatory minimum sentence than similarly situated whites.
He's back.
here.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I'm back. That sucked. I was literally just going off, and then the internet had to nerf me. But do you mind sending me that study? I want to look over the methodology of it.
Sure, it's in the it's I think I tagged you in where it is in VC chat.
can I also
Okay,
just say that
perfect.
chat, your comments are funny. I like the comments here. Keep them coming.
Yeah.
Let's.
Here's another one. I'll drop for you.
Well, which one do you want me to look at first? Because we can do them one by
The first
one.
one.
Okay,
first one.
and that's
And here's
the
the second.
5hered.com one, right?
Guys, if you guys are curious about the studies,
No.
if you're curious about the studies
No,
that they're
this is
dropping in chat,
that's from earlier.
they're in
That's
VC
from
chat in our Discord server. So !put Discord in chat. I'll do that myself in a second.
Oh, is
Is
it nature.com?
that's where you'll find it. Okay.
No. So when we were talking earlier, I talked about how there are two places within the there are 4 steps in the system, right? And there's the cop citation or the even the police stop, right?
I just
That's
need to
what
know
that-
which one it is. Like,
the
is it
one
ResearchGate
yeah.
or Sentencing
Yeah.
Project?
So
Okay,
ResearchGate, yeah.
perfect. Okay,
People of
so
color experience discrimination. Oh wait, here. Where is it? Federal prosecutors, for example, are twice as likely to charge African Americans with offenses that carry a mandatory minimum sentence than similarly situated whites. And that's what is from the ResearchGate. link.
I need to see if I can actually pull up this study. If not, you may just need to screen share it because I have to go through my university to get access to it. But I might have access to it, so I'll let you know in just a second.
Okay.
Sorry, I know everybody hates the
How long
the
have you
research
been engaging
stuff.
with this topic, by the way? I just don't feel that you're very up on a lot of the data. Like, I haven't heard any sources from you. That's what I'm saying.
Well, like I said, and you actually were very keen to say, "Oh no, I totally understand that." You only found out you were doing this topic, today. I don't
Okay.
have a research doc. I don't have the Vosh
Sure, I
doc.
understand, but certainly you
Mhm.
have
I have my
something
own
you
doc
can
that I
point me
used for a
to,
previous debate. So
like maybe even
yeah.
a video essay, something, just like
Okay, so
because it seems like you're pulling shit out of your ass. Like
so true.
that's all
Yeah,
it seems like.
I'm totally
The
making
stuff
up
that I
the
have
heat
pulled
maps
up
and
is research I did like a couple of months ago. So
I
yeah.
think he's talking about me. So the
Oh
first
yeah, no,
thing.
Stardust. This wasn't towards you, Adil. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. At the beginning, when I wasn't pressing you too hard, I said, "Well, I don't have like a big doc or anything because I haven't
You
made a
haven't
doc
pressed me at
about
all,
this.
my friend.
I've
So
engaged with the issues and I've heard stuff and I've come up with issues. So I'm doing what I can given the resources I have, which is looking at the studies that you or Stardust has come up with, poking holes either within the rhetoric of it, with the understanding of it, or asking questions about maybe we can assess, the existence of crime a little bit differently. Maybe responsibility and order prevents the crime from happening in the first place more than us talking about how we can minimize harm after the crime has been committed. So I'm trying to attack this stuff, and I think everything I've been saying is actually important, and all of it is a genuine question or a critique of the way you're addressing the topic. But now that I don't have, a peer-reviewed study or I haven't,
I'm not
quote
even
unquote, done my
asking for
research.
that.
I
I'm
think
asking
no,
for
you just did. You said, I
something.
don't even
I
have
did
any
initially,
studies or.
but I'm lowering the
Mm,
bar because I need
okay.
something other than Twitter talking points here. I
Oh,
need
it's good at
something to
talking
engage
point.
with.
Okay.
Because
I
because
just gave you the heat map
you are
example.
act the heat map example, I'm like, okay, cool, heat map example.
So do you
Again,
agree with
that
the heat
doesn't
map example
address
then?
what is being talked about here. You are acting as if we can only tackle this from a single angle, and to try to tackle it from any other angle is missing the point. This is very dishonest. You
No,
aren't
no, no, no,
engaging
no,
with
no,
this
no, no, no,
topic
no, no,
at
no, no, no,
all.
no,
You
no,
just
no.
aren't.
Okay,
You
Wick,
aren't providing
what you said
information.
is
You aren't
blatantly
responding to our
dishonest, Wick.
information.
Wick, this is a
I'm just
blatantly dishonest thing.
you know
What
this is
I
recorded,
said,
right?
and it's
People can
actually
go back
it's
and
funny
watch it.
because
So
you are now saying exactly what I said to you, which is that I don't hear you ever speak up about any of the harm minimization that comes from actually reducing criminality, which is why
I
your
addressed that
phrase,
earlier.
which
I
was
argued
very well,
that
no, and
reducing police
what you said
brutality would
when you
reduce
addressed it,
crime,
what you
which would
said was,
reduce harm.
well,
This is
well,
I
you're not going
addressed
to get
you.
rid of
I
crime,
addressed you,
and if
sir.
you
sorry,
address
one
and
time,
contextualize the issue,
Guys, I'm tired of the dick swinging contest. I can't compete with the dick swinging contest because I don't have one. Okay, so
No,
let's
and
take
I've
a
already
step back.
won. So let's go. Kai, please finish your point, and then I'd love to hear from Wick.
I don't even know if I want to interact with it because I do think it's a little bit bad faith. I didn't come at this saying that there's only one way to look at it. I actually came at it asking, why do you only look at this issue one way? Why is every single time I hear this topic talked about, it's always what we can do after a crime has been committed? And so I have given certain solutions. I am open to talking about mandatory minimums. The reason I brought this up to begin with, Stardust, is from the research and from my time in the field, just listening to people talk and engaging with the conversation. Wick, you'll be so happy to know that I understand, if I'm not mistaken, that mandatory minimums were actually pushed for by minorities, by Black people. There was a large community of Black people who were pushing for it as a way of holding whites responsible when they would often be able to, get off of crime scotch-free. Now that mandatory minimums have been used, or rather have been disproportionately seeing effect on Black people, it's a big problem, which again comes to it, well, is the problem the overuse of mandatory minimums, or is it the fact that the crime that warranted the mandatory minimum was committed in the first place? And
Right.
again, it's
So
the
if you
chicken and
look
the
at
egg.
this, if you look at it, it's they look at the like similar crimes, and even for similar crimes, it's far more likely that a minority will get a mandatory minimum applied to them.
Mm.
And even if that is the case, that it was a minority group that proposed mandatory minimums, that doesn't mean that we don't revise these things when we find out that they actually have a disproportionate effect on a group, regardless. Because when that one group is, I'm sorry, I just got a donation. When that one group, it's a fucking chat, dude. When that one group is disproportionately affected and they are suffering, then that leads to generations after them growing up without people in their home. And it leads to generations after them being affected by the availability of jobs, the ability to vote, right? Feeling more disenfranchised. And as a result, all of us suffer because of that. So I think that there is something that we can do here with the mandatory minimums, especially if they're being disproportionately applied towards minorities.
So
We have a situation where, again, we have data on this, and we can look at the data. And
And-
as Stardust so aptly put, there's data on how the laws are enforced that disproportionately hurts minorities. There's data on how policing is done, which disproportionately hurts minorities. There's data on the use of force when criminality happens that hurts minorities. And again, all these data points cannot simply be waved away by saying, but what about crime? Yes, crime should be reduced too. There are ways we can do that. But when we make the justice
One of those
system more
ways.
equal,
One of
what are
those
some of
ways
those ways?
also.
As-
One of those ways is that if the mandatory minimums are not disproportionately applied towards minorities, this means that there are more minority households with two parents in the house. And what's always better for a house than one parent is two parents. So
well, it's
Sorry,
also
sorry,
better
just-
for a
just-
household if
I'll
if
finish
the
up.
father doesn't commit
You
crimes.
said,
So,
sorry, I'm a little confused. And maybe I missed that part. Stardust, you said mandatory minimums are disproportionately applied to minorities, but mandatory minimums are the mandatory minimum. So
prosecutors are far more likely. This is what I've cited. I actually tagged you in it, Prime. Research suggests that minorities may receive harsher punishments than whites, in part because prosecutors may be more likely to apply mandatory minimums to minorities. And studied in California, 3 strikes law sentencing found that African Americans were more likely to receive 3 strike sentences than eligible whites, and that Latinos defendants were more likely to receive 3 strike sentences in counties with larger Latino populations.
There's a few
Yes,
things here.
What she's saying is when prosecutors
I know, yeah.
bring a charge.
I'm a little
Yeah, I think-
confused. I'm a little
Prime,
confused.
I don't know how, Prime, I've been talking about this for the past 30 fucking minutes. I don't know, like,
No,
I'm not trying to.
I'm calm down.
Okay.
I'm a little confused because mandatory minimums are mandatory, right? And so if you're
Here, let me come halfway.
One
Can I
second,
come
hold on.
halfway?
No,
Prime?
hold on.
Okay.
I'm a little confused because and I don't want to be very clear with what you're saying. I read this before, right? But like is what this is saying is that they're are choosing to charge them with crimes with mandatory minimums, or
No.
okay, or
No.
Can I come in? My understanding of this.
oh my god,
Okay.
or it's saying that they can choose to apply a mandatory minimum, which would not be a mandatory minimum then. It's Kai, do you have an answer to that?
Sure.
Or
Yes, yeah. So my understanding of it is that there's a recommendation of a certain, punishment, right? So if you don't put something forward, like the way you would say you prosecute somebody or you're charging them with first degree murder, second degree, or whatever, you can choose what you're charging them with. So if you don't charge them with something, this is the way I understand it. I may be wrong. So Stardust, you seem more literate on it. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But
that's what I said. That's what I said
the
previously.
prosecutors basically have the choice of waging that like an eligible mandatory minimum
Exactly.
crime. Yeah. So if they don't charge them with that, though, then the mandatory minimum just doesn't get used.
So that's why I just want to be very clear as to what you're saying.
Okay,
is that
sure,
if it's
sure.
rather than like another crime that doesn't have a mandatory minimum. If that's what you're talking about, then that makes sense. But
Yes.
the way this is worded, it sounds like they're like if first degree murder, for example, has a mandatory minimum, it sounds like the prosecutor can or cannot have that on. but that's
No,
not
they're
how that
more
works.
likely to they're more likely to charge with offenses that carry a mandatory minimum sentence.
Okay,
So, yeah.
there we go.
Then
Just-
similarly situated whites. That is the important part of that. Then similarly situated whites.
And yeah, so I am not able to access the doc because I don't have credentials for the research paper.
I think
So
Sci-Hub is a good. Let me see if I can get it on
if you
Sci-Hub.
can find one from anything other than ResearchGate, I should be able to pull it up. The big thing for me, and the reason, and Wick, just to show you again that I'm not out of my depth in this research, the reason I don't take this evidence at face value is that by just saying that, black people are disproportionately charged with mandatory minimums or serve, sentencing disparities, that alone is not an argument, because there are so many things that go into what kind of charge is being brought up against somebody, the way the crime is committed, the brutality in which the crime is committed, whether the crime was planned. All of these things have an effect on whether. Well, hold on, Wick. So whether or all of these things have an effect on the kind of punishment or the kind of crime that somebody is being charged with, which is why with a lot of the disparity research, they don't control for the variables either of repeat offense or of the severity of the crime or any of these things, which is why a lot of the research can frankly just be thrown out. Because if you're not taking that into account, none of the research goes adequately far enough in examining why the disparity might exist, because all of those reasons are reason enough for a disparity.
So when we do studies and when we talk about these things, there are obviously no study is ever. You should never take any study as set in stone, because science is always changing. We are always getting new data. We're always getting new statistics in. Things change, and I understand that. But when we've cited not just that study, but multiple studies showing this discrimination happening in multiple different ways, not just mandatory minimums, and you keep sticking to this one thing as if it's the only thing, and you again not even addressing the data, because you have admitted you cannot see the data that is given, but you're just saying, well, it might be wrong because they might be doing this and it might be in this way, but I can't tell you because I can't see the data. So I'm just gonna, I'm gonna cast some shade and cast some doubt. It's kind of effective rhetorically to a certain crowd, but it doesn't fly in any kind of space outside of fucking Twitch. So I just want to make that fucking clear here. That this is silly. It's silly season right now.
Wick, I actually agree.
You have no fucking credentials.
No, Wick, I agree.
That you're kind of going with here. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just
so
this is silly. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, and I think it's absolutely ludicrous. You are saying that I'm doing something wrong by saying, "Hey, I can't." Well, hold on, Wick. Just let me.
Let him finish. Let him finish.
It's
No. It's his turn, Kai.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You're saying that I'm doing something wrong. Not that I am, wrong. I mean, you believe that too, but you're saying I'm doing something wrong, or that I'm obfuscating or hiding something or not engaging with the evidence just because what? I'm sticking to one argument that we've brought up so that we can hash it out because I have yet to validate the evidence or not. I'm asking Stardust if I can see the methodology. I mean, this is the first time I've ever seen somebody in this scene get upset when I say, well, without validating the methodology of the study, I can't quite agree with you that it explains what you're saying it does. And you're saying, oh, no, that's so stupid. Just take what I'm saying at face value. Just believe me when I say the study says this. It's not just about what the study abstract says. It's about the way that the study is done. And if I can't verify how the study is done, I'll want to see how the study is done before I agree to your point. But you're getting upset just because I'm asking to see how the study is done.
It is equally unreasonable to disbelieve something immediately without being able to verify.
I didn't. Okay.
As it would be.
I haven't made an assessment.
Guys, we can settle this right now. I linked it. Please. I linked it.
But we know what he's gonna do. I mean, this is what happens: is he goes through it, he finds one thing that to someone who doesn't do research or doesn't do data, he'll cherry pick one portion of the thing and not realize that in analysis like this, they take metadata. So they take sources from a lot of different areas and they compile it and they present their findings in the abstract. That's what it's for. So
yeah, Kai, I do see that study that she linked.
Yeah, so I'm looking here. I need to get down to the methodology.
Yeah, I'm scrolling too. I'm like, I don't know where.
Yeah. And again, I think anybody who's good faith in the audience is not going to have a problem with me I'm not accepting the evidence. I'm not dispelling it. I'm just saying I would
But
need to see the
you've quite
methodology
okay.
before I can
Let's
agree or
just
disagree
let's
with it.
just
That's
clear
all
what you
I've
have
said.
said.
That's not wrong.
That's what you have said is not that. You are misconstruing what you said earlier.
And what have I
You
said?
said, I don't believe it because I cannot validate this. This is what
I
you
did
said.
not
These are the
say
words
that.
you used. You know this is recorded, right?
Yeah, look,
Okay,
if you're
you can go
telling
back
me
and
that
look.
I
I
won't agree
encourage
to
everyone to do
something,
so.
I won't agree to something until I've seen it, is that the problem?
So there's a
Hold on,
data
I'm
there's a
looking
data
through these.
methods
Oh yeah, the
section.
methods, yeah.
Mhm. Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay, so charging sample consists of U.S. mail or of male U.S. citizens with U.S.MS arrest records and U.S. attorney files opened in the 2007 to 2009 fiscal years. What I'm looking for basically is if they calculate or if they control for a severity of offense, if they control for prior infractions or prior criminality, or any of these things when they're taking the stats into account. Because if they don't, then these variables likely explain away any of the disparities that we're talking about.
Let's see here.
Wait. Okay, so well, I got to keep reading. Hold on. I won't jump on it yet.
Okay, so I'll entertain the audience while
But
this is
not
happening.
entirely explain what
Sorry, we're all kind of just
characteristics
looking through.
prior to charging.
So everyone, what's happening right now is
With the same prior records. Here it is. The study provides robust evidence that black male federal defendants receive longer sentences than whites arrested for the same offenses with the same prior records. On average, black males receive sentences that are approximately 10% longer than comparable white males, with those at the top of the sentencing distribution facing even larger disparities.
All right, do they control for the severity of the crime?
For the same offenses with the same prior
Well,
records.
the same
So,
offense could be
it
the
does talk
same,
about
like
criminal
it could be
history.
murder, right? So,
Okay, on page 45,
It's yes. The answer
Page
is yes.
45,
It is the
they
same
talk
severity.
about how they construct their key independent variables such as race, arrest offense, and criminal history. So they do take into account criminal history and the
which is
arrest
good.
offense. Yes.
Which is good. So let's see.
Charge severity measures are also taken into account.
So
Here, hold on.
Can we just trust that my study, like we just went through it?
Again,
I just need to read it. Just give me a second to read it. Give me a break.
I'm helping you read it. I'm helping you read it.
I
Doesn't
know.
come
I
back
to
agree
engage
with that.
with
It's
you.
just,
He's looking
I
to
don't
poke
think I've done.
holes.
I don't think
He's
I've done
looking to,
anything wrong. I'm just trying to read the study, Wick.
I get it. I
You
get
sound
it.
very
I get it.
conspiratorial, Wick. You're
I get it, but
assigning
you know,
I am
intention to
repeating
me.
back to you what you have said. You are here to poke holes in this data. You have
I
said
mean,
that on this stream.
and one part of it, it says that the source does not records up to that the severity of these charges aren't properly recorded in the AOUSC data sources, which is what they're using. So it's not properly recorded except for misdemeanor distinctions. So just the source itself doesn't necessarily have that, but it depends. Yeah, so like that might be included for some and not included for others.
It's the same offenses, the same prior
It says,
records.
I mean, it says AOUSC records up to 5 charges at the filing stage and 5 at the termination stage. However, the AOUSC data do not reliably code the severity, and he put it in italics, of those charges beyond the felony misdemeanor distinction. Said charges are simply...
Okay.
Wait, no. That's
give us a
huge.
page?
No, hold on.
The
Whoa.
felony
Read that.
misdemeanor
No.
distinction?
No, read that one more time. I want to make
Okay.
sure I heard that right.
Sure. The AOUSC data do not reliably code the severity of these charges beyond the felony misdemeanor distinction, right? So it'll tell you if it's a felony or if it's a misdemeanor, but like
But
maybe
it won't
not
tell you
the
what
grade.
degree of felony.
Right,
Instead,
but it's
charges.
Oh my gosh!
minor,
No, that's
This
the
is what it
hugest
actually
flaw.
says. It says, however, because we are focused on the severity of charging, not subsequent sentencing fact-finding, we prefer a metric that, while guidelines-based, was premised only on what the prosecutor actually charged, the elements of the crime. So they did take that into account. Not perfectly, as Prime mentioned, because there is a difference between misdemeanors and felonies.
Severity doesn't even play into mandatory, right? So
Yeah.
Exactly.
It says that we therefore develop, calculate, and apply several new severity measures to map the initial charges and their combinations into. This is, if you want to read this yourself, this is on page 9. Kai, if you look on that PDF, page 9.
Well,
And this
the
is
bottom
I want to get
point
through
out-
like the
I
part
just
you
want to
were
explain to the
mentioning
audience real quick.
before.
I just want to,
Yeah.
while everyone's reading, I just want to explain to the audience this kind of rhetorical trick. They jump on one thing and they take it in isolation. They say, "Aha, we got him. This is the thing that disproves the data," without taking the whole thing to effect. And I understand
Severity
it's hard to
doesn't-
take in everything
and
to
severity
effect right
is
now.
not even a criteria for mandatory sentencing.
Indeed. Yes. And
It's
so
3
again,
crimes
don't fall
equal
for these
sentence.
tricks, gang. Don't fall for these tricks because that's what they are. They're tricks. They're tricking you. Do not
Here,
fall
give
for
me
it.
just a second. I
Yeah.
want to finish reading through this. Also, very poignant point. If I have a concern with the methodology, which literally doesn't see a distinction between degrees of felonies, they literally just look at the distinction between misdemeanors and felonies. Then
But
that's a rhetorical trick.
Again-
And if you do that, you're bad faith, is what I'm
Okay,
hearing.
but
I just want to
again-
read through it. I just want to read through it. That's
Okay,
all I
give
want
it-
to do.
give him a
Of
second.
course, but it before any, because again, I'm not partaking in the dick swinging contest. Okay, I don't have a dick to swing. Severity does not play into the fact into mandatory. It just does not. It's not relevant, really. We're talking about the application of that. So
Sorry, I kind of tuned that out. I'm still reading over page 45 and 46.
okay, I'm used to
I'll
it.
get
It's
to
okay.
it.
I don't have a penis, so I'm
Yeah,
used
but
to
no,
it.
but what we were talking about is on page
No,
9.
Stardust. As far as this conversation goes, I would much rather listen to you than Wick. If it
It's
says
true.
it.
So-
It's really hard to get disproven and get
okay,
it
so,
again
but-
and to look
No,
like a fool. I
To be
get
fair,
it.
what we were talking
I'm not
about,
gonna be mean. I'm sorry. I'm not gonna be mean.
oh,
Brian, you
actually,
can go ahead.
it's labeled page 9, but it's like page 11 of like the actual document. So that's
Okay, thank you.
okay.
It's PhDs and peers that reviewed. Damn, dude.
So to the audience, people are just looking through these PDFs.
I think if you spent one-on-one with me, you actually probably wouldn't like me that much more than Wick, to be honest. So. I can
and
in
to
the
I'll
chat.
take the hate. It's okay.
others, I'll let some like two other
Boy,
people.
one of your friends on Cozy TV keeps fucking hate rating me. Can you tell him to chill the fuck out? It's like he's got a crush on me or something.
Wait, who is
tell
it
Dalton,
Dalton?
Tell
Is it
Dalton to
Dalton?
fuck off, dude. He tried to rate me 3 times in one
man.
day. Can you please
Oh,
tell him to
man.
back the fuck up? Either back the fuck up or come fucking talk to me, you fucking pussy ass bitch. All right? Tell him that. Tell him I
Very
said that.
vulgar.
Tell Dalton that I called him a pussy ass bitch who's too scared of a woman to talk to a woman. Instead, he has to hate raid me multiple times. Okay? Fuck off, Dalton. You suck. You have a tiny penis, and my penis is bigger than yours, even if I don't have one. Sorry.
I don't know why everything always has to go to, phallic objects. I don't know. It's very
Probably the
vulgar.
one that
But it is
You
the
look
only
very
way you guys
effeminate. At the
communicate.
very
That's the
beginning.
only way you guys communicate.
Does that have
That's
to do
all
with
it is.
phallic objects? I'm saying
It's
that you're
always
very
about
high
that. It's
voice.
always
God.
about with you guys. Lefties or righties, both of you guys. It's always about that.
So
About what?
I didn't notice Loner Box rated me. All right. I don't think they have a crush on me, but Loner Box, thank you so much. I'm not sure if you're still there. It was like 4 minutes ago. Thank you for the 96 people who came in during that. We're talking about systemic racism. We're talking with the illustrious Kal.Clips here. Who's a conservative who is isn't on the systemic racism train, and we're having a small private panel. I'm letting a few people on. But anyway, we usually have panels here in case you're unfamiliar with us, and in case you already haven't left because this is 4 minutes ago. But if you're still here, we do panels all the time, and we do open panels as well, where we just let just the general public in on a conversation to have fun, right? So anyway, if you're enjoying this, right, this kind of discussion, or curious about other things we have to offer, including one-on-ones. Interviews and all that good stuff, right? Then hit that follow button right now. Make sure notifications are on so you know I'm going live, right? We do this 6 nights a week. !social and chat or social media, right? Hit us up on social media. We got Twitter, where we tweet out, then we're doing stuff. We have a Discord where we're doing all of this. It's all happening on Discord, and we have offline conversations. I think you want to be a part of that too. And YouTube is where you'll find the VODs. Like, comment, subscribe, and consider becoming a YouTube member by hitting that join button. Okay.
I'm gonna go and let someone else have my spot. It has been fun. I know we've yelled at each other a little bit, and I know you may not like my conversation style, but I think it's been a very productive conversation. I hope that maybe we could talk again in the future. Maybe not. I don't know if you want to go through that again. But just real quick, I'll plug my own stuff. Twitch.tv/Death of Certainty. I'm going to have a panel tomorrow on platforming and censorship with Not So Erudite and Mad Lad and whoever wants to come. So see you guys
You
later.
didn't
Thanks.
invite me, Wick? Wow.
You can
what
come.
the frick?
Please, Stardust, if you
I'm
want to
getting
be there.
good
There's
for most
misogyny
criticism on
within
this
the
platform
community.
for
What the-
fucking no, not Sue Erudite is a girl also, but I got the most hate for platforming the past month, dude, and you
Please,
don't
come
even
on
think
in.
about Stardust.
okay.
Stardust, you
I just didn't
how
wanna
dare you
bug you.
platform?
Can I
didn't
just
wanna bug
say?
you,
Can
but
I just
need
say
someone.
to both of you, from the outside perspective, don't you guys just get so tired about all the bickering about like, oh, be careful who you platform? I mean,
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
just
I
have
do. That's
conversations.
why I've
I've
been.
that.
Oh, look,
Yeah.
Kai. Okay, I've been going on
It's fucking
Twitter. Every
stupid.
tweet, every other tweet I have is about don't fucking tell me who I can platform. I'll platform whoever the fuck I want to, and everybody keeps telling me Stardust, Stardust. How could you platform this person? Oh, Stardust. You know. So no, I don't like it. I don't appreciate it. Please leave me alone. Let me live. So yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Very
But
true.
Stardust,
So
please,
true.
I know I just didn't want to bug you because I know I bug you a lot. But if you want to come on tomorrow, you're more than welcome.
Okay.
So anyway, see you guys later. I'll let someone else on. Bye
Okay.
bye.
Okay,
Thank you for having
you
me.
have a good one, man.
Bye.
I do want to point out to the audience, he did the whole soliloquy about look at this rhetorical tactic of looking at the methodology of the studies. And after I looked at it, it looks like a pretty well done study. They have some issues just because it's difficult to look at the offense severity, or I think a lot of people don't calculate for it, but they try to find a substitute for it, which I think they did pretty decently. So I think it's actually a good study. I'll
Well,
agree.
Props to me. It's props to me, right? Because it's the study
Is
that
it
I
you or
thought
did
of.
somebody in your chat give it
I
to you?
was the no. I have a whole fucking doc.
He's done this
Okay, I
several
will
times.
screen
Okay.
share my fucking doc with you.
No,
I was
it's okay.
debating Sean last. Okay, and
Actually,
I got
can I
fucking.
see it? I did see the
Yeah.
Sean last debate. That was
That was horrible. It was horrible. I hated it.
It was
Okay.
an interesting
Yeah.
debate.
But
But
I was
what
I was a baby back then. But
what I want to do, I want to do the
this is
soliloquy to
my
the chat.
racism
I want to do the
graph.
chat
Okay,
soliloquy. The
I
best
screen
part
shared it to
is
you guys.
Wick is going to go off about, like this is the rhetorical tactic. Let me tell you Wick's rhetorical tactic. His rhetorical tactic is trying to emulate Destiny and not doing it so well, which is why you get into the whole bickering and you get into the you're being bad faith. You're so stupid. Do you spend any time at this at all? And to the audience, it looks very fake because he employed this tactic after me questioning maybe the way he approached the conversation or the issue itself. So it seems very fake to the audience, but it's even more fake when at the end he says, oh, well, I had a really fun time talking to you. It's like,
Hi.
dude, look, either accuse me
Hi.
of dishonesty or don't. So that's
He's
the
gone.
rhetorical tactic
Hi.
there.
Please look at my document, okay? Now, please never fucking doubt me again about me doing my own fucking research, okay? Thank you.
This is very autistic.
It is, yeah, isn't it? But I'm not autistic.
I don't even mean
So-
that in a negative way. Being autistic's kind of awesome, but now it's like a flowchart doc is the new meta, I suppose. But
Yeah,
hey, what's
yeah.
going on, Dustin? How are you?
What are we doing, man?
Wow. Okay. Don't even acknowledge. Oh, Stardust, your study's actually pretty good. Thank you.
Just
I
close-
saw bubbles. I didn't see any of the studies. Again, I've read lots of studies that
I
are.
linked the study to you. I was the one who
Well,
gave it to you, Kai.
No,
How much are you
I
going to
said
deny
that-
me? My
I said
oh
that
my god.
study was pretty
Ugh.
good.
Oh my
Okay.
god. I gave it
It's
to you.
never enough.
I gave
It's
it to
never
you.
enough.
It's linked
I
in
can't-
here.
I
It's
can't
linked
say
in
that the
here.
study
it's
is
linked
good.
in my document,
I know,
dude. It's
and
linked
I
in my
said that the
document.
study was
I'm
pretty
going-
good. You can't
I'm
ever
so
say
sad.
enough to please
I am
these
so
people.
sad.
You can
I-
never
yeah,
make
you
them
can't.
happy
You
enough.
can't because
It's
I'm a
always,
woman,
give me
okay?
more,
And
give me
nothing's ever
more,
enough for me,
give me
okay?
more, give me
Nothing's
more
ever
compliments.
enough for me.
I want more
okay?
compliments. Feed them to me. It's like
Yeah.
Valentine's Day candy. I'm
So
telling
help
you.
me figure
Unbelievable.
out what do you mean by this study is pretty good. Like, can you help me? What does that mean?
I
to
linked
you?
it. Here,
Yeah,
I'll tag you.
Oh, yeah.
within the
Sorry,
conversation
Dustin, have you
of-
been keeping track of been watching the stream?
Yeah, no, I've been watching the stream. I
Okay.
want him to.
Yeah,
help
okay.
me kind of figure out
Okay,
what
sure,
it
sure,
means
sure.
to him.
Well,
Yeah,
then,
Yes,
Kai,
so-
and
go
I'll
ahead.
link it directly to you, okay? From my document, okay?
Yes.
Directly to you, okay?
Your effort.
God forbid, okay?
So to me, what it means that the study is pretty good. It's within what I've seen from systemic racism studies. So the things that I've started looking for when you see the studies or when I look through the studies are typically a variety of controls that they give. Because I think a lot of studies I've read don't provide those controls. So the controls I look for, to be honest, I haven't engaged a ton with the mandatory minimums one, and mandatory minimums aren't something I've explored particularly. But with most of like the sentencing disparity research I've seen, a lot of it
Mhm.
doesn't control for offense severity or whether there's priors or a variety of different variables like that. So when I say it's good, it's that they acknowledge that there's kind of a disparity, or rather that they don't control for anything past misdemeanor and felony, but then they try and create more controls themselves. Which I had a very rudimentary look at it, but the fact that they went through the effort of doing that rather than just saying, well, we don't really control for more than misdemeanor versus felony, I think
Mhm.
was, very good faith of the creators of the study.
Okay, so now I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, it shows about a 10% disparity in sentencing as a
Hmm.
whole. Was that
That would be to
correct?
Stardust, not to me. I don't know the study as well as she does.
Hmm.
Would that would
Yes.
be correct? All right, so
Yes.
help me define that. I I imagine is 10% going to be enough for you to agree to a systemic racism in this particular setting on these particular studies?
Out of not being very like flippant about my position, I'd say it's probably not enough to convince me, but it's evidence
Sure.
that I would say points in that direction generally.
Okay, yeah. So fucking geez, man. I mean, it's an incredibly complicated subject. Like, what else would you want to see? Or like, what? Where are differences? How can I get that other like, you know, what else would you want to see where we can keep going down that line?
Well, also here, actually, let me just turn you up. You're a little bit quiet.
Oh,
Are you
sorry.
using your right mic, or are you close?
Yeah.
Try it again. Yeah, now
There
you're
we
good.
go. Perfect. That's a
Yeah.
little bit better. The chat
Okay.
was
Yeah.
just like, can't
Perfect.
hear this guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a few things I'd have to do. Honestly, for me, it would have to be more counter research. I think that's the way that you should look into things. Engaging with a lot of evidence from one side to me is never the best way of going about it. Part
Hmm.
of what I would need to convince me is doing more statistical research myself so I can become more fluent in reading methodologies and in understanding the statistical significance of that 10%, which is why I'm not quite ready to say that, the 10% is like a really big deal or what it can be
Yeah.
attributed to. Part of it is
Sure.
just I'm not super fluent in statistics. But yeah, to kind of win me over, it's, I don't know. I think a large part of it, because I'm already seeding, I don't have a research doc, has to be
Yeah.
about
Sure.
the
Yeah.
rhetoric. I think I would have to see a competent rhetorical attack of criminality as the necessary first mover, if that makes any sense.
It doesn't. Can you help me? Can you help me
Yeah.
out a little
So,
bit? I joined the
uh,
Marine Corps. I didn't join the Air Force, so
no,
like you
no
got
worries.
Barney
So,
style as much as you can.
the part we were talking about a little bit earlier was how it's kind of a chicken and an egg.
Hmm.
And Wick tried to say it's like a dichotomy I'm striking up between, the harm either of excessive force or the harm of original crime. But
Yeah.
I
Of
kept
course.
saying, and what I think is more important is that original crime, if that disappears or if that is reduced, takes away the opportunity, or rather drastically reduces how many times excessive force is used.
Okay, yeah, no, and I don't think a lot of people are going to disagree with that idea because fundamentally, what I had written down earlier is, um, let me see here. I'm sorry, I took a lot of notes. The elimination of crime would, of course, stop police interactions between police and citizens. Correct?
Well, yes. And of course, I'm not saying that we can totally eliminate crime.
Right.
I
Of
just
course.
think, yeah, I think a lot of the, well, if I could just sum it up rhetorically, I'm more
Yeah.
concerned about the problem of mass criminality than I am with mass incarceration. And I'm more concerned with original crime than an excessive use of force in stopping that crime.
Yeah, man. I don't think we disagree on that part either. The problem that I'm having is what and how, and I think Stardust and I are trying to take a look at this is like how society and typically in a sense I would say legislation can help address these problems, right? So you brought up heat maps, which I think was a pretty awesome thing as far as like an assistant tool in policing, right? Well, in part of that heat map discussion, um, I believe kind of ended up coming like something along the lines of broken windows policing. Did you ever hear about that?
I've heard that said way
Yeah.
more, and I should definitely know what it is with how many times I've heard that said, but I
Okay.
couldn't like define it.
Yeah. Basically, it'll be a kind of like a definition for as a society, if you're in a worse off neighborhood, typically you're going to have more opportunity to commit those crimes, right? So I think, at least, maybe I shouldn't include Stardust in this one, but at least on my side, what I would want to see is a responsibility as a community, as a country, to come together and start investing in those communities so you have more opportunity and a less kind of draw or incentive to do criminal behavior. Do you think that that would be something that would help you kind of address what you would say is like, or kind of go towards what critical race theory may be if we can agree upon like these neighborhoods are kind of blighted areas, they are pretty problematic?
Yeah, there's a few nuances to it. I don't want to bring critical race theory into it too much, unless we get into like the anti-white portion. But even then, I wouldn't really cite CRT very much because I don't like talking about it. I find it a rather boring subject.
Sorry, I got
Um,
confused because that was like
no
the
worries.
subject of the panel. Yeah, my
Oh,
bad.
no worries.
Okay. Yeah, no.
Wait, is the panel like
No.
subject CRT?
So I just put that on the screen because
You
people watch.
editorialized. Oh, you
I'll put
bastard.
anything on the screen to get people in. But like
Goddamn
it's
right.
systemic racism, so which I said in the beginning. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, what I would say is I think there's a reason that these places are impoverished. And I think the one thing you can do to totally ruin or to really act as a detriment to your future prospects and to your happiness or your opportunity later in life is to commit crime. And I think, again, if we're talking about the chicken and the egg, it makes sense that the crime comes first. I think if there are people who commit crimes and they end up in jail and then they come back out of jail, obviously they have fewer resources and whatnot.
Correct.
But I think that the initial crime is what causes the impoverished circumstance. It might be a repeating cycle, but the beginning is always the criminality. So even if you go into a community and you make it, a little bit richer, if you restore Chicago, eventually if people continue doing things that destroy their opportunity, if they keep making choices that make it difficult for them to prosper and to pass down wealth, that's really largely their own fault.
Well, yeah, of course. But the question that I'm trying to dig at is like, how do we address those issues, right? I don't think most people inherently want to be arrested, right? I don't think, I think that most people, and we kind of see this in the drug business as far as like marijuana goes, you see that most people want to end up doing it legally. A great example of how the state fails at it is how they end up doing the legalization process. You can look at California's weed legalization and the problems that it's having for those small business opportunities that are actually very detrimental. So you're actually having an expansion of weed crime and everything kind of that goes along with that.
Yeah,
So
I was going to say that because of the research I've done about marijuana, everything that I find is like there's crime that's up around distilleries, like even legal ones,
right,
and that I mean to me it kind of makes sense that there's either somebody a guy, you have a dealer, and that guy's always going to give you like
right,
the
yeah,
friends and family benefit or whatnot. I haven't seen weed legalization give too many positive impacts. I also am just against marijuana in general because I think it makes you retarded. And I do have a
Get
study
going,
for
guys.
that in case Wick
well,
is
yeah,
here.
well, yeah. But my point that I'm
Um,
trying to address is
So
more along the lines.
clear on quickly, started. She wanted to say something.
yeah, I'm gonna get going. Nice to meet you guys. Kai, I would love to like have a talk one-on-one sometime if you're open to it. Yep, I'll see you guys later. Have a good one.
Sure thing. Have a good one.
Yeah, and I might need to have a one-on-one talk with you, Kai, because I don't think everyone here has been doing a good job arguing for this. But go ahead, keep going. Dustin, I'm gonna bring someone else in as well.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to address is like if we're talking, if you want to say that criminality then breeds that ability to increase police interaction and that brutality part, then what we need to, I think at least, what we need to address is how do we get to those systemic problems of criminality. What I'm saying in the examples that I've been trying to use before is an issue of like legislation and what we do with sentencing and everything along that. So can you kind of like help me flesh out why you don't think that if we address those from a legislative issue, why that wouldn't work?
Well, it's not so much that I think it wouldn't work. I think I just take, more of a combat crime, or I take more of kind of a negative approach to crime rather than I
Hmm.
don't mean to kind of rhetorically characterize what you're saying, but I think more of an apologetic stance towards crime. I think a lot of the angle that, leftist people literally just within their philosophical framework, by being more empathetic, it's more of like, well, let's see how we can reduce sentencing, or does reducing sentencing decrease, the amount of crime down the line. And for me, I would look at, like prison recidivism, and I would say, well, maybe, the harsh sentences are something that's necessary. I find it very difficult to believe that, harsh sentences or a large opportunity of being caught committing a crime would be things that encourage criminality or have little or no effect on it. I think that's a little bit silly, because you do have to get to a point where having a punishment for crime is kind of the status quo. You're always going to have a punishment for crime. And then it becomes difficult to assess, like, at how many years does it have a negligible effect on criminality or
Hmm.
whatnot. That's kind of my thought process around it.
Right, and I think one of the issues that we end up having, and a subject that you really do bring up that is pretty effective, is talking about recidivism. Now, if you were to sit here and tell me that if we have an issue in sentencing, just like the extending of sentencing, let's throw out violent crime, talking about how, because most of the time those aren't really well thought out uh, uh, crimes, correct? Crimes of passion or anything like that. Some of those are typically which are where you get your longer sentences, murder, everything.
And
I think
typically not recommitted. Like, those crimes are never or very rarely committed more than once. Yeah.
right, sure. So if we talk about recidivism and we talk about these long sentences, I actually look at it from the opposite, and I think it's actually becomes problematic from a couple of different a couple of different ways. A lot of these crimes are done in adolescence when we're younger, young, dumb, and full of cum. Like we make a bunch of mistakes, especially as men, which is typically where we're going to have a lot of our problems at. So now you've introduced them into an environment full of other criminals, most of which may be more violent than the crime that they're convicted of. You then end up, what's the word, where you get used to acclimate, where you have them acclimate into that environment, and then you don't have any skills that are being learned that are then valuable in the job market. Would you disagree with what I said so far?
I think that's generally true.
Okay, so when we kind of look at just those three little things, I would say that what we end up doing, if and when they do get paroled, and hopefully we all agree towards paroling them, they don't have those necessary skills to go out in the job market and then become and work towards being a successful regular citizen, right?
Hmm.
You disagree with that idea?
I think it's generally true again, but I don't know. I guess I'll ask you, because you seem very well read on the topic.
Sure.
Have you kind of resigned yourself away from the mistakes that we supposedly make while we're young? Because I mean, I've made plenty of mistakes, but the mistakes I've made are not particularly criminal, and I am fairly certain that if I were to, even go to jail, I kind of have a more sober assessment of it. I think part of what we need to talk about when we're talking about this issue is actually to be more harsh about things. Maybe it's a problem that people cannot understand consequence. Maybe that's part of the issue. And maybe if they don't understand consequence, or if they can't control themselves enough to, come out of jail and be a responsible adult and try to enter the job market, because I think that, I don't know, I would be surprised if there's a large effort made to re-enter the job market.
Well,
I think.
and that becomes part of the problem too. And this is also, again, a societal issue that we end up having. Is a lot of the times it's really hard for businesses, particularly small ones, because they can't afford the insurance to hire felons, to hire previous criminals, because there is a sense of liability. That's something that why we have to kind of address that type of reform as we look at how we cut down on these recidivism rates, right? So there's not only just the fact that you just got out of jail, sometimes that you don't always have, if you don't have a good prison system, you don't always learn certain trade skills. You don't always have access to that. Hopefully you educated yourself as far as like reading, writing, and arithmetic would go. But then you have the issue of trying to find a place that can afford to hire you and take that risk and that financial hit of hiring somebody who is a felon.
I understand what you're saying, but I think all of it supposes that people are putting in that effort. Is there like a measure that people are putting in that effort? Because I would be surprised if the same people who are not understanding of consequence enough to stop themselves from committing crime would be the same people who would put in a lot of effort in getting a job after they're out of jail.
Well, yeah, but what you had just said earlier, and what we had both kind of agreed to, as far as like the level of adolescence, when you are younger, you will typically make those mistakes. As you
Did you
age,
commit a crime when you were younger?
I didn't actually.
I
I
didn't
did.
commit a crime either when I was younger.
I
I,
did
I would
I
something
don't
wager.
worse.
believe. I
So,
don't believe that. I don't believe that. I honestly
well,
don't believe that for either of you. I believe that. No, I'm just put this out there because like
yeah,
this
sure.
this conversation is fucking
What about
driving me
me? What do you
crazy.
believe it for
Like
me?
I'm losing my shit. But like I believe that you all were teenagers. You did things, right? You did acts that could be problematic in terms of the legal system, but you weren't in a neighborhood, an environment that was over policed or whatever, and you just didn't have that bad day, that one bad day that is more likely to
Mhm,
happen in some neighborhoods rather than other neighborhoods. So to say that you
sure.
guys were all completely clean, I doubt that. I very much doubt that.
I think there's I don't know. I think there's a nuance to it. I think there's a nuance to it.
Well, there's a
Certain
nuance to everything, but
yeah.
as we're having this
Mhm.
conversation, what we're trying to do in the attempt is to try and work you way towards that, like like you would use Stardust as study, and you said, that's a pretty good study. What we're trying to do, all coming on here, is trying to give you those breadcrumbs to kind of like look maybe more in that direction. And from my point of view, what we can do as a legislative ability and a community as a whole, not just through the access of the law, of working towards addressing these problems.
Mhm. Then I guess yeah, to me I'm having trouble buying into the like, yeah, we're all dumb. We all like commit certain crimes. Like I think there's a harshness to it that often is undiscussed, and I don't think that all the crimes are committed are equal. I think many of the crimes that we're talking about end up being felonies, end up being burglary, assault, rape, like all these things, and that's not any crime that I would have committed while I was younger. And it's not just about being in a community where you're going to get caught for it. I think it's just about
Well,
committing
this isn't
severe
a world,
crimes, and I think that's
right? But
part
we don't want to
of it
live a
that's often
world where
undiscussed.
everybody's just Kai, correct? We don't live in that world. And I think, no offense to you, but I wouldn't want to live in a world where everybody just makes decisions off of your circumstances or who you are, correct? That's kind of the issue that we have at hand. It's not so much like just because I didn't make these mistakes, nobody else should have, right? I don't think that that's what you're saying when you made that statement, correct?
Oh, of course not. I mean, if people were held up to my standard, it's
Well, then,
just
yeah, of
everybody would
course.
be in jail.
So,
No, no, I'm
so I,
joking. I'm joking. But
right, exactly.
no, I get what you're saying. I think it really though it almost seems like it's being underplayed a little bit. Like people don't need to be held to my standard, but I think holding people to the standard to not like violently assault, rape, or burglarize people, I think that's a fair standard.
And
Um,
I
mm,
don't think we have those issues because you can look at as far as crime charts, excluding the kind of the year of the pandemic, which did see a spike. If you look at crime charts through our years, they have precipitously dropped down. We're not having these huge issues. And some may say, and there's no evidence to back this up, some may say, yeah, it's because we're locking up all the criminals. That's not necessarily true because we're having a drop in violent crime as a society wholly worldwide, right? So, although you may focus, and I think we would agree that resources should definitely go towards solving those crimes as far as like unsolved cases and murder or anything like that. And we definitely need to focus on those crimes, but those are more flashy. We have to address those problems before they get to that escalation. One of the best ways that I see is addressing these ways in a societal way where we admit, yes, these heat mapped areas probably are where we need to have police, but what we cannot do is just sit there and say, let's keep arresting these people and the crimes will go away because that's
uh,
not how it works.
Okay. I'm gonna give Professor Meat here. I got it right this time. I'm gonna give him a chance. I should have just assisted on a 1v1. Kai. Next time, 1v1. This is literally driving me fucking insane. This is
Well,
insane.
feel free to tell me what I'm doing wrong.
You're trying your
Okay.
best, and I appreciate
I'll
that.
tell you what you're
I
doing
think
wrong,
I
Dustin.
think
You already
Dustin's
know what
doing
I'm gonna
pretty
say.
well. Dustin's doing a lot
No,
better.
because
than,
yeah, I know because you're
than
fucking
Wick.
steamrolling this guy. Yeah, so yeah, I'm sure you think he's doing well. Let's go to Professor Meat.
Whoa, hold on, hold on.
Professor Meat.
Yeah, I
Yes.
don't think I'm
Professor.
steamroll. Like, look, I am the biased one as far as how I think I'm performing. I don't think I am steamrolling Dustin by any stretch of the imagination.
No,
And
he's
if I was
steamrolling
to
you.
be convinced, okay, yeah. Which did you mean? Because I would.
I'm
Like,
saying
I don't know.
I'm saying this is not
I think
actually
that
getting to
you're-
the. I don't think this is getting to the heart of the matter. Like like at all.
So,
Like,
so,
not
all right,
even
so
close.
let me blow up the conversation
God.
like I love to do. because
Tactical
every fucking
N-word
time I come on
coming
the
from
panel,
Professor Meat.
every single time I come on the panel, I feel like the only thing, like everyone is so educated on these subjects, but everyone uses all of these pieces of facts and information to argue so past the point when there's so many logical errors that have been conducted that I don't give a fuck about like 99% of what has actually been said on this panel, all right? There's some logical, Dustin already knows everything I was ranting about unless he wasn't hearing me in the chat, but there are a few basic logical points that I feel like haven't been addressed, and until we can address those few logical points, Mr. Kai here, I don't feel that I actually understand what you're saying, because I feel like there's like, I'm gonna say anywhere from 2 to like 8 different
Just start.
fundamental like concepts that I feel like you're
start.
trying to argue for, and I
Just
don't know
start.
which one actually is what you're trying to say. Now that could be because of me, but we're gonna figure it out, because there's a
Let's
there's a
find
wall
out.
at the beginning of this conversation that has not been addressed. All right, so
Let's
here it is.
find it out. I
All
think
right,
I know
so
what it's
here's
going to
some
be.
basic
Let's see.
points. Here's some basic points. Maybe you might be able to speed a little bit of this along. Are you trying to make an argument that this is about race or not? You don't have to elaborate, but I'm just trying to get a.
I would say no.
It's your
I
argument
haven't made
about
that
race.
argument.
Like, do you feel like we need to? Are you making some kind of white nationalist argument or not? I'm just trying to figure out whether.
No,
that's your
I'm not a white
position on this.
nationalist, and I haven't made the argument about race.
Okay, sure. I'm trying to whittle down the way I could go through this. So, I guess here's my point. We know that like nutrition, IQ, wealth, poverty, all of these things have generational and causative effects, or at the very least, strong correlative effects with each other. All right. And we know that it has nothing to do with race. All right. We know that regardless of race, it can affect people disproportionately within racial groups over time, but these concepts, right, don't have anything to do with race. These concepts are true across systems, right? Like, these are basic things scientifically that we can agree with, right? Okay, cool. That's awesome. Okay, if we can agree on that, then we're already further than I was scared that we weren't even gonna be able to agree on that. So if that's the case, because I feel like I'm not even sure whether or not
keep going.
you
Just keep going.
think that
Just
systemic
keep going.
racism is real, or whether or not it's bad or is real, but you just don't care. Because I feel like if we can agree on that, then systemic racism is real, because that is all we need to say that systemic racism is real. That's like those are the only arguments that are necessary to prove systemic racism over several generations. Because we can also agree that Black people's history in this country as a community, on average, because this is what we're talking about, right? Were shoved into disparately poverty-ridden communities in the beginning of their integration into the society. I'm sure we can agree on that. And so if that's the case, then I don't see how you don't arrive at systemic racism. Now, maybe we can talk about whether or not you think systemic racism matters, or whether or not you think the framing is weird, or whether or not you think that a certain way of tackling it is bad. But I feel like that is like the beginning of this conversation, and it seems like every point that's being argued is like every contention is like past these points, and it's breaking my brain. Monkey meat is coming out. He's he's rattling the cage, and
Okay.
I have got to have these questions.
So yeah. So what are you asking him exactly?
I'm asking him to contradict. I'm asking him to clarify whether or not he can contradict any of those claims, or whether or not he's admitting that systemic racism is real. And if he is admitting that systemic racism is real, then I need him to move forward from there and argue as to whether or not it's bad, or whether or not he thinks it doesn't matter. Because I haven't felt like I've gotten a clear answer on that, and there's no way that I can address any point that he makes until any point he makes is irrelevant until he can answer those questions. I just need that to be clear, because otherwise everything else is just begging those questions. Like, I need that. You don't understand?
Yeah, so obviously the framing is going to change depending on if I'm talking to Justin or Wick or Stardust. So I'm taking kind of different approaches based off what I'm hearing from them, which is why we got into, the characterization of the argument about systemic racism with Wick. So as far as let me tackle it from the front. So I agree with you that black people were forced into disparate outcomes at the beginning of the country. I would probably disagree with you about how those problems have persisted. I don't believe that the effects of slavery are felt by black Americans today. There's certain research I've read about.
Hold on. All right. So you just contradicted the fundamental claims that we agreed upon. How is it possible, if we agree on these fundamental principles?
Well,
right,
hold on. Say
like
the one I
rich gets richer
disagreed
and the poor
with.
get
Say the
poorer.
one I contradicted.
Tell you what you contradicted?
Yeah, which one did I contradict by saying that?
So we agree on these claims.
Well,
How
what's the
is
claim?
It possible that
He's
wealth,
just trying to
IQ,
give you the
and
answer right
nutrition
here,
are all correlative,
Professor.
causative, and can spiral. They in both directions. If the higher IQ you have, the higher your wealth you have, the higher nutrition you have, all these things are going to affect each other. They're going to affect your children, regardless of race. Okay, and we shoved African American communities in these poor communities where if it was us, we would be affected the same way. That's why I was trying to ask if it was about race. And so but we did it to them. We shoved them into these communities, all right? These things are causative. We can try. If there's no way that you can say that systemic racism will not be existing today, if you can agree that we started from that lower point, because if you shove people, any community, into disparately impoverished communities, and then you have another community, regardless of anything about them, that is in less poverty communities, there's not being regulated by actual legislation or otherwise into disparate communities. There is going to over time be effects where people are affected by these things, where communities are affected by all sorts of things. Poverty is cyclical. Wealth is cyclical. The rich get richer. The poor get poorer. These are like basic things that tend to happen in society. Like wealth gaps grow without intervention. This is a natural phenomenon, and these things continue to be cyclical. Now, white nationalists like to try. No, you're not a white nationalist. White nationalists like to try and use these talking points to prove racism, but it actually is it's a complete misrepresentation of the data. It disproves racism. So what I'm trying to say is, unless you're making it about racism, then how do you not get to systemic racism from these points? These points lead to systemic racism.
I'm just trying to help out this conversation to move along, right?
Yeah.
So I've already lost it. So Kai,
I know it was
Kai
a lot.
responded to something. He made a single point, and you said it contradicts a claim, right? And
Because
then he
he's
asked
saying-
for
so
one
he's-
specific.
yeah.
What was the thing that you said, Kai? What was
The thing that he's. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I got you now. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The thing that he said was that African Americans are not disproportionately affected by the effects of these policies today.
Yeah,
by
slavery.
I said slavery.
You said slavery
disagree.
specifically. Okay.
Slavery. Now, there's no reason to think that there's a billion% reason to think that is going to the effects of that are here today. We can test it. The way you test things scientifically is you form a hypothesis, and then you look at reality and see whether or not that hypothesis is being proven true. And we can look at society and see this. Now, to a certain extent, you have room with interpreting social studies data to come to conclusions. But the thing is there is way more fucking causative data to support systemic racism. And there's tons, and you don't have any to devalidate systemic racism. That's my point. And so if my data shows systemic racism, which I don't say, you have to explain how my data doesn't show systemic racism. It seems self-evident to me. So that's what I'm saying.
Well, I'm sure it does seem self-evident. I think the problem is that you've kind of created this thesis statement, and then it spiraled from that point, and it becomes kind of a thing that, without
I can write it. I can write it down. I can go through each individual logical point.
No, I'm sure you can. I'm sure you can. What I was about to say, is that we would probably
Okay.
reach disagreements throughout. So I can agree that
Just listen to them.
Black people were put into disparate outcomes at the beginning, but I could also, say, like I did, that I believe that slavery or the effects of slavery disappeared after about 2 generations, at least. And I mentioned this earlier, when compared to blacks who were born free, blacks who were born slaves, had they had completely the same kind of outcomes in measures of education or of job opportunity and these kind of things measured after 2 generations. So my argument would be that after 2 generations, the disparity between Black Americans who were born free and those who were born slaves disappeared, or the ancestors who were free or slave. And that's one of these parts where, you've got the whole list, but if I disagree at the very beginning, we kind of shut down the conversation going all the way down. So you can't get me to the bottom if I already start to disagree at the top.
Sorry, 1 second. Thank you. I have to do this, and you'll understand why. Thank you, Mr. 12-year-old and Android girl, Mr. 12-year-old Android girl, for gifting 100 subs. Thank you so much. Holy crap. Unbelievable.
They must really like me, man.
They must really like Kai. It's the hair. It's the hair,
Yeah.
right? I got to get you back on more for the hair. But
I appreciate that.
Yeah, but thank you, Mr. 12-year-old Android girl, for the incredible kindness of supporting this community, keeping this up and running. We need your help to actually make that happen. So thank you for the 100 subs. Oh, and I guess I can make you a VIP because anyone who gets 100 subs becomes automatic VIP, right? Sorry to interrupt. I just had to get this out. Thank the people who are keeping this channel up and running, right? So you're a VIP, Mr. 12-year-old Android girl. Thank you so much. And anyone else, if you want to support this community as well, subs to the channel, gift bits or gift subs. This is how we keep it alive. We have a resub, use that resub. That also help. But gift bits, gift subs. If you want to help out this community, if you want to keep us alive, you want to allow us to have more of these conversations, right? Where I'm getting super fucking frustrated. But if you want to see me blow my top, well then help out the channel. Okay, I'll leave it there. All right. So I forget who I interrupted. I'm sorry. You said something.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say real quick. And if you want to support me, go to powerchat.live/Kal.Clips. If you want to gift, I don't know, what's the equivalent of 100 subs? What's that equivalent to dollars?
$5 per sub, so 500. Yeah, and plus tax.
Donate $500. Go ahead.
Sam's got to get his. Just to kind of piggyback off his point, and what Professor's going to tell you, Kai, is yes, slavery did happen, and then that, if I agree with you, let's say I take it at face value, that 2-generational jump equalizes out. But then we also have the introduction of Jim Crow laws, right? Where it then inherently pegs them back into a second-class citizen kind of hole and directive. It's not the same as slavery. We made some progress. Congratulations. But now we have a same large and lawfully enforced systemic problem with Jim Crow laws. Do you think that just comes down to another 2 generations?
I wouldn't say it's like just another 2 generations. I haven't seen like a measure of it. Like the study
Sure.
I'm talking about as far as slavery is called Slavery in the Intergenerational Transmission of Human Capital. So yeah, like I can't put a number on it in the same way, but I think the effects are kind of worn down over time. We can kind of talk about the efficacy of how those effects are done, but with certain either stimulus injections into certain communities or different kind of things. I think, I'm not going to say like a $500 billion platinum plan is going to be like the saving grace of the Black community. But I think over time, what we're seeing, and kind of the way that I was framing this at the beginning, is that we may still say that certain Black people or certain communities suffer the effects of institutions that had them impoverished. But ultimately, I'm pretty Republican in saying that I think people can ultimately drag themselves out of their
bootstraps.
I wouldn't say it that way. I hate that terminology.
I know you wouldn't, because bootstraps get pulled fucking off. You don't have
but I would generally agree with that sentiment. And of course, people are going to say, "Well, you're like a middle class white guy, lower middle class white guy." But I think there's a part of it that does come down to, a personal responsibility that I often hear unaddressed. And that gets to your other point, Professor Meat, which was like, what's the way you're tackling this? One of the big ways I'm tackling this, and one of the things that I really care about, is the way that the issues are discussed by most of the leftists that I talk to about these issues. And I've never really heard a discussion that I find easy to sympathize with, which is I never hear a discussion about, the criminality, and more so about the overuse of force.
Okay, so do you agree that poverty, we basically can show with data that like poverty essentially causes crime?
No, I wouldn't say that.
Well, I could start bombarding you with studies that disprove that if you want, but that's like pretty.
I don't think I
straightforward.
could blatantly
Poverty
agree
causes
with that.
crime.
I think I could
relative-
probably say that there may be a
It's
link
strongly
between
causative. I mean, there might be exceptions, but it is strongly causative. Like just across, like generally across all society. There might be particular exceptions, but that's like one of the best indicators that conceivably exists for crime rates in communities is relative poverty.
I would be surprised if there is any kind of near causative relationship, or I would be surprised at what the reasoning is for a causative relationship between certain crimes and poverty. I think, you could explain away things like burglary, but I would be more impressed if you could explain away like murder and things like that.
Well, so just to be clear, so we could try to get into all of the nuance of the reason why. And that would be like, I mean, I'm just being clear. There's no way we could actually reasonably do that in a good qualitative way without getting. That's like we're talking about a case review. We're talking about like a study, like a review.
Do you think
of
that there
multiple
are
studies of
actually
this thing.
causative reasons for crime? Would you?
Again,
not-
I wouldn't call them
one test.
positive because. Well, yeah. Well,
can I ask-
I'll answer this real quick.
Okay.
I won't monologue
Sorry, go
very
ahead,
long.
Gary.
I'll say I wouldn't really call it causative. I don't believe in determinism. I think you ultimately have free will that surpasses it. But I would say that certain environments or certain circumstances you're born into make that a more you're more likely to want to rob somebody if you're impoverished than if you're wealthy. Certainly.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so
That seems like some progress right there.
okay.
So if you are,
I think I
if
affirmed
you
that
are-
from the start.
All right, so can I ask you then? Oh man, I want to ask this before my question I was going to ask. Would you agree that systemic racism, at least in some way, manifests when it comes to the way it encourages certain groups of people to theoretically, let's say, commit robberies? Would you be able to concede that point that that's an example of systemic racism?
I don't think so because I think that you.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I think you put people into poverty.
Because I'm more interested in your answer to the second question. I was
Okay.
just curious. So, because this is why I was asking about race, and this is why I keep coming back to this. What do you think it is then? Did you think that black? Like, I hate to paint you in a corner, but like, you see what I'm saying? Like, you're just saying black people suck and commit crime. Like, what's your?
Go ahead, Kai. Say it again.
Or sorry, maybe I missed it. I'm sorry.
Wait, what part?
As far as like the question that I asked, like, do you think that there are some reasons that are causative towards being predisposed to cause or
yeah, but
commit crime?
but Kai's making the point that that's like, correct me if I'm wrong, Kai, but you're sort of making the point that maybe there's some examples, but that's not like overall qualitative of this.
No, I wouldn't say it's causative. I'd say that you're more likely to commit certain types of crime depending on your environment. But I also think that you can't say that being poor is going to cause you to commit other kinds of crime, or at least I would be very surprised if being poor would cause you to commit certain crimes.
When you say that, yeah. But when you say that, just to be very clear before I continue, you are talking about the disparity between the rates at which certain communities. We're talking about systemic racism, so you're talking about the rate. We are talking about the rates at which, if we're talking about systemic racism affecting Black people, for example, we're talking about Black communities, right? Just to be clear, right? In this example.
Well, relative to the conversation, sure, but I think everything I've said I'd equally apply. I don't think an impoverished poor person who is white
it
would
could be whatever.
have.
Ethnic,
Well, exactly. Yeah.
A racist, whatever groups you want to assign to systemic racism, right? But if that's what we're talking about, then if you're gonna say, because it sounds like you're conceding to us to what we're saying up to a point, but you're saying, well, there's this other part where what you're saying doesn't actually apply. So if we're talking about that part, it sounds like you're implying that is race.
No, then what part?
That whatever crimes you're talking about that aren't affected by poverty.
Well, are you saying? Hold on. I think you might be saying that I'm saying race because most of the time it's attributed to that. What I'm saying is that I don't quite see the correlation between, like violent crimes or like murder or stuff like that. I do see maybe a correlation between being poor and robbing somebody, but I don't see as much of a correlation between, like sexual crimes or murder, like crimes of passion.
Okay,
I don't see that as much correlated with poverty. I do think that, the poverty correlates that you're talking about are, yeah, sure, maybe correlated with poverty,
maybe I'm
but I don't think it's causal, and I also don't think that it's particular to black people. Like I think these crimes would be just as prevalent in poor white communities.
So then you agree that these crimes are caused by or strongly correlative with poverty?
No,
You just defeated the racism argument by saying that it's all about poverty.
Not totally. I mean, all I've said is that I think it makes
Then
sense.
I have no idea what you're saying. I'm just letting you know because you literally said something like, I don't know if someone can clip you or something, but you literally said something like, I asked you to answer about those crimes that aren't affected by poverty, and you said, yeah, I think that white people that were equally in poverty would commit crimes of similar race, and it's not just about race. That was your answer.
Wait,
So, like, I don't know what
hold
you're saying,
on.
if you can
Go
help.
back. Say that one more time. Sorry, I'm getting all wound up now.
I asked you to provide me. I asked you to clarify one. It seems like you're admitting that there's all these other crimes.
let me help him out
which
here.
I
So
think-
let's take out
Okay.
the crimes that you agree are influenced by poverty, right? So what we would typically say are more minor crimes, burglary,
like
theft,
I said a second ago.
pickpocketing,
Yeah.
stuff like that. You
Sorry.
agree that those are correlated with poverty, correct?
Like burglary and whatnot.
Correct.
Yeah, but I think you guys are
Okay,
pulling
well,
more.
hold on.
Hold on. I want to say this
All
because I want to be clear. I think you guys are pulling more of an own from it than I'm actually saying. What I'm saying is like, the chance of, committing white collar crime in a very poor community is very low. The chance of committing crime, like if we are to assume that people will commit crime in any circumstance, the kind of crime they're committing is likely going to be burglary if they're poor. Not that being poor causes them to commit burglary. That's not what I'm saying.
Right. But those are correlated by circumstances known as poverty. Is that?
Yes, it's correlated in the fact that that's the crime that would be chosen rather than another crime.
I have to fight back against this. I have to fight back against this. So a way we would demonstrate whether or not, and maybe a social scientist knows better than me, the way we would demonstrate whether or not something is causative or correlative is by trying to see if we can demonstrate in other examples whether or not these like correlative or causative categories continue to be either continue to be causative, or if it just seems to be an example of the particular situation. That's how you know whether or not it's correlative. But time and time again, the link between poverty. There are all sorts of examples. So this is how you tell the difference, okay? There are all sorts of examples of crime. There are all sorts of examples of situations where crime would correlate with all sorts of things, but when you extrapolate it across other societies and systems, it doesn't seem to be consistent. If that is the metric that seems to consistently correlate with crime, then either you're saying that like crime causes poverty, which would be a weird which I feel like would even still admit my point.
That's what I'm saying. No. Well, okay. Well, I think
this is fascinating. Okay.
No. This is what I said. Well, hold on. Let me tell you what I'm saying. I'm saying. Because that is literally what I'm saying. That's what I said in the discussion with Dustin. I think that's what I said before, is that ultimately when we're talking, and again, it's kind of like the same argument as within, over policing versus original crime. I think there is, something that really sucks and something that will make you poor is if you murder somebody. It's not very good for you.
Yes.
And sure, you can be poor after that, but I think that murdering somebody or committing crime in the first place is what causes it.
Okay, so I agree. So my opinion is the crime is these things are cyclical.
I disagree. See, that's the disagreement.
So it seems to bear out in the science, but that's fine. We can dig into that because this is what I'm trying to get at. I don't want to dig into that just yet. This is what I'm trying to get at because it feels like I just want you to. I have the Mr. Girl take. I want you to own up to what you're saying because I feel like you're saying everything you're saying is leading me to one conclusion. And when your language just isn't parse enough. I'm just trying to be very clear because I don't understand what you're telling me, honestly. So. I'm
trying, man. I'm sorry.
No, sorry. Me too. Hold on. I'm trying. Because I'm just gonna walk you through a few points again because you agree with me on everything, but then my final point is like there's a disconnect, and it feels like you say you agree with me, but then you just say you don't. So we agree. So let's say, okay, crime, we don't have to agree with my position, we can agree with your proposition. Crime causes poverty, all right? Let's say that that's the case. So if we're talking about systemic racism and the policing, disproportionate policing of ethnic minorities, I'm assuming, I don't know if someone wants to correct my language, then if we're talking about those crimes that are not controlled purely by poverty and are not caused purely by poverty, then what is your explanation for the crime? Are you saying that that these disparate communities are not committing certain crimes that are not affected? Are there certain crimes that have nothing to do with poverty that
You were like,
I think I know what you're
close,
saying.
but-
I think I know what you're saying.
It's a
I think
yes or
I
no
know what you're
question,
saying.
you know
Can
what I
I?
mean?
Well, I think I know what
Yes.
you're saying, and to be as forward with you as I can. I don't know if I would call myself and I don't like dealing in the absolutes here because I myself am not entirely convinced of any particular story. I do not believe that being poor causes you to commit certain crimes. And I believe that committing crimes causes you to be poor. I believe when you're in those poor circumstances, sure, I would even say that, maybe your dad commits a crime and that means that you're poor because he doesn't, get a job or whatever. But then if you go and you commit, a crime that I would say is not reasonable, or rather is not explained away by your poverty, but rather, I don't know, I think the case of rape is a really good one. If you're poor, I do not see a motivation to rape somebody. And maybe there's a statistical reason for why poor people might rape somebody because of poverty. But in the absence of the explanation of, being poor causing that crime, I tend to believe that
maybe I can tap in to, maybe I can break this circle here.
I was going to tell you probably something that you would have liked.
I just want to clarify something on
rape,
rape, just really quick, because I think it is kind of a big deal that we kind of have to address. As far as rape goes, just specifically, most cases of rape and sexual assault are not done at random. They are usually done by domestic partners. So, while we do have those examples, and we were talking about a small minority of a minority of classes of rape, most of them are happening between domestic partners. So when you bring up this example of rape, I think it would be wise to at least acknowledge how small that factor is. Does that seem fair?
Factor within what? Just within versus being domestic or versus all crime?
Versus if you're saying that you don't think somebody's more likely to be raped because they're poor, or to rape because they're poor, I think that I can agree with you because most cases of rape are done by domestic partners.
Okay, so you think that that's the variable that it takes over rather than I'd agree with that. Then I think if I'm to dive into kind of the characterization of the debate, I think the problem is that too often almost all crimes, or a lot of crimes, and maybe it's that I don't talk to enough smart leftists, but I think a lot of crimes are written off because of poverty, when I don't really find that to makes sense. And so I think, and Professor Mead, I was going to give this to you right before you cut me off. I think there is, to an extent, a genetic component to it. I don't think it's, well, actually, it's pretty much what you said. I think that the, like IQ or, certain other heritable characteristics, all of this stuff plays a role. And the appearance of either a certain trait or an allele or the IQ or whatever role that has on crime, that is passed down within groups. I don't even think we really disagree here. I'm arguing.
I just
not
wanna,
quite.
I just hold on. I just want to be clear.
My internet is awful, dude.
I just want to be. Can you hear us, Kai? Can you hear us, please? Kai?
Yeah, I can hear you now. My internet's awful, dude.
No problem. So I want to be clear. Are you saying Black people are genetically more likely to commit crimes or violent crimes, maybe specifically?
I wouldn't feel comfortable making that claim yet, but I would probably, the way I would approach it to you, because I want to be as good faith as I can. The way I've thought through it, Professor Mead, don't flip out. I'm trying to be honest with you.
Literally say two statements you keep.
Let him go.
Yeah, I want to hear what he's
I'm trying to be
say,
as
please.
intellectually honest as I can with you.
Just
man.
continue. He addressed me. It's fine. Keep going.
Yeah. So the parts that I'm kind of thinking through, I wouldn't say that Black people are genetically disposed to certain kinds of behaviors, but I would say that coming from Professor Mead's original argument, if we find that IQ is a very high correlate, or even has a causative relationship with crime, which I'm not arguing does happen. But if we do find that, I think it would follow that people who just through either, intermixing and, the kind of the genes being carried through one particular group of people who are centralized in one area over time, if those people have lower IQs and the lower IQs correlate with higher levels of violence or whatever, I think that's an explainable thing. I'm not arguing it's the entirety of the cake, because obviously every single time that genes exist, they have to exist within an environment. And if the environment does not, play on the display of those genes or does not have those traits come out, then it's less likely that they'll actually be displayed, which is why, people talk all the time about the warrior gene. There's plenty of people who have the warrior gene who have never been violent in their lives. And a large part of that is the environment that they're brought up in, which leads to the display of their traits. I am not giving a totally hereditarian answer, but I wanted to talk you through the thought process.
Here's the problem with that, right? Is that okay, you state this, right? You're saying, I'm not saying any of this, but here, let me say all of this stuff, right? So,
I don't think I've said that. I don't think I've said that.
At the start, you said, I'm not making this argument, but here's this argument I said, no.
I was actually very careful.
I don't want to put words in your mouth. So if I got it wrong, I apologize.
Dude, when you watch this back, you said verbatim contradictory statements.
No, okay.
Because you missed the qualifier that he put in there.
So Kai, please, if I got it wrong, then please let me know.
Yes. I think Dustin understands this. I don't mean this to be slippery. I mean it to be exactly what I said. And it could come off as contradictory, but what I said was I haven't made that argument. Not that I am not sympathetic to it, not that I don't believe parts of it, but that I haven't made that argument. And the reason I said exactly that was not to obfuscate, but to tell you at what point of the debate we were in. If you would have asked me, do you believe genes have, some role in determining behavior? Absolutely.
Okay.
So ask me questions that you want, and I think I'll be very consistent.
So what part? So before you jump back in, then I just want to get you on this one point.
Sorry,
right?
I'm being a bully. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. I just want to get you on this one point. Everyone's had their turn attacking our friend Kai, and he's done a good job defending himself. But so you're saying you believe parts of that argument. Which parts of that argument do you believe?
From what I've seen, I think there's a pretty strong correlation between criminality and IQ. And I think that when you control for IQ, some of the violence disparities begin to disappear between groups. I think low IQ whites are, I think the disparity between groups who are low IQ, regardless of race, and more so controlling for IQ, I think the disparities begin to disappear. So I can't attribute it entirely to a race. I can more so attribute it to what I've seen as the variable. And I think that variable appears in many instances of violence all over groups. So that's the part that I would say I'm sympathetic to.
So then would you agree with me that a better way to look at these things might be to, and I'm not saying this is totally my point, I'm just trying to bridge a gap here. Would you agree with the idea that that these things is not really a racial issue, but it's really like a poverty issue, or a generational IQ issue, or a generational wealth issue, or something like that? Because here's the thing.
Hold on. No, I understand. Let me answer real quick. I just needed to think a second about how I'm framing it.
Sure.
Yes, with a big asterisk of literally what you said in the beginning, the heritability of IQ and the mixing of, or rather the confining of a group that mixes with themselves and passes an IQ down within a group sees the lower IQ more prevalent among Black people. But I think that, IQ is heritable within groups, just like
sure.
Like
and
any other.
If we take something that might make people online think I'm a racist, that's fine. I don't give a fuck. It's something that we've noticed in some studies is that sometimes if you take Black orphans from disparate communities and you put them in certain more wealthy communities, all of their IQ will go up. Their wealth will go up, and then their children will have more IQ.
I'm pushing back on that. I'm pushing back on that. That's the Flynn effect, right? the
Am I
Flynn
thinking the
effect.
wrong thing?
Like Michael Flynn, right? Where he basically said that, if you put people in certain environments, the IQ increases. But even Michael Flynn and every single kind of
Haven't we agreed that that's true?
well, hold on. Certainly it's true, but you're making the case that, you can put people in environments that will ultimately totally change their chance of doing these things. And to an extent, I agree.
We know exactly how much it will change
To an
on
extent,
average.
I agree. And I'm not. And by the way, like, I'm not saying that, black people are this way and then like they need to be this way forever. I'm not saying that.
Okay.
Like, if I can decrease criminality and if I can put people in better circumstances, I'll want to do that. If I believe, which I do, and it's true that, putting people, like you just said, like putting black orphans, for instance, in, upper class communities is going to increase their IQ. I would want to do that. But that goes along with understanding that the increase in IQ is not something that's exponential or can continue forever. The increase in IQ is, I think it's measured at up to 10 points. And past that, it even starts declining later in their lives. So, the argument that, putting somebody in a new environment will totally change them.
Effects of like wealth and IQ and nutrition and stuff like that, and poverty. What does that have to do?
Well, hold on. I was just addressing the point you were just making about the orphans. About the orphans.
Well, let me say, hold on. What the orphans? Sure, that was just an example to falsify, to like. Sure, we don't have like I was almost trying to bridge a gap there. We don't have to focus on that. What I'm saying is that it sounds like you're saying, which is sort of my point, that there is a huge causative link, at least with a lot of crime, where if you were poor or in poverty, your children are going to be are going to have a hard time getting out of that poverty. They're going to be affected by that. Their education is going to be worse. All right, all sorts of things that can affect IQ and performance, including education, are going to be worse. All right, if that's the case, and you think that these things could lead to in some categories, in a lot of categories, surely higher crime rates. All right. If that's the case, then can you concede that at least to a large extent, maybe there's something that you could call like the challenges of systemic poverty that we have disproportionately allocated certain ethnic minorities to? Would you be willing to concede that concept?
I see, and there's always like the caveat. It makes sense. It makes sense, and I don't mean to seem slippery. Well, hold on.
Then what's the difference
hold on.
Racism.
Every single time that I hear kind of these points brought up, I look at the other things. So, for instance, with school spending, I've seen a lot of research that shows that even within states or within certain school districts, the school districts, or rather the schools that are more made up of minority students, have more funding allocated to them than the schools which are not within the same district. And so it gets to the point where I'll agree that maybe there's a disproportionality in the amount of people who face poverty, but I think most of the steps of the way, especially with the last 20 years, we've tried to remedy that. And ultimately, like I said, regarding the Flynn effect, you can do certain environmental things to remedy the effects of the heritability of IQ, which is strongly correlated with life outcome. But even if you do that, I don't think you can totally rid the gap. And if you can totally rid the gap, then is it systemic?
Professor, stop. Just stop.
If you
Professor, stop. Just stop. Okay. So, I want to throw out a few caveats of my own. IQ is not a catch-all, right? IQ is not everything. Okay. IQ is a culmination of a bunch of different genes. Do we all agree with that?
Agree.
All right. So
it's just a measure of like all sorts of things can affect.
Sure,
it.
right.
It's just an abstract concept.
Well, hold on. But can I say something real quick?
You cannot, because I want to finish.
All right. I respect you, Dustin. I respect you.
I appreciate it. Now, if we agree upon those things, and IQ means something, but it doesn't really matter what it means for the purpose of our conversation. If you would sit here and say that that's an identifier that you see in between crime and IQ, what do you think we should do with that information? What ought we do as a society with that information? How do you think we would remedy that issue? What is the responsibility to do? Because what you're telling me as of right now is you're looking at a bunch of different metrics that says we cannot do anything. We can make some progress, but we cannot do everything to bridge that gap.
I'd push back on that. I'd push back on that a little bit.
Yeah.
I think
this would be important because that kind of defines like what you would say in between like a race realist or like just a racist guy that says, you shouldn't be in our country, right? So
Yeah.
that's the problem that we're all having, trying to
Mm.
figure out that when you say like IQ is certainly assigned to these different people, it's not their fault, yada yada yada. It seems like we can't do anything about it. Help me
Well,
figure out like why. Or
I
like
think
more
it would
reason.
be ludicrous to say that a low IQ is somebody's fault, right? Like you can't say that somebody's genetic
Well,
makeup
I
or
don't
the
give a shit
heritability.
about fault. Like I
Yeah,
don't give
yeah.
a shit about
Well,
fault, right?
and I wanted to say, like I think that'd be ludicrous for anybody to say. But as far as the conversation about heritability and what we can do, I think we should absolutely do anything that we can observably see to increase the IQs of certain people going forward. And part of that, is environmental to an extent. But I think the more dangerous thing is that it is not true. And by the way, just to contextualize, my basis for the use of IQ is that it is very strongly correlated to life outcome and life success. I'm not saying it's causal, but it's absolutely very highly correlated.
Yeah, sure.
So if we understand this, then absolutely we should do anything that we can observe to increase IQ or increase life outcome. But to say that people are like totally plastic and can be changed however we want them, I think is dangerous, because that is not the reality of it. I
don't think anybody's saying here. I think what we're saying.
No,
and what
I don't think you're saying that. But I think that the general
trying to do-
understanding is that there is not an effect that genes have. The understanding is that people are a blank slate that can be changed however they want. And I don't think that's the case. I think people have a makeup that unfortunately binds them to either certain behaviors or ideas. You know how many times people message me and they're like, how do you understand certain things, or how do you argue, and how do you do this and that? And I could tell them anything. I could give them, well, I listen to these podcasts or I do this and that. Certain people will just never be able to speak their mind the same way as other people. And I am not championing that, but I'm saying understanding that is necessary so that we stop believing that everybody can be infinitely changed, because I don't think that's healthy.
Okay, I'm gonna switch someone out. Professor Meat, I'll switch you out. I'm gonna try.
All right.
All right. So thank you so much. I'm going to
thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem.
See you, man.
See you, buddy.
By the way, how long does this go? Because I've got a gaming appointment. I don't know, sometime. They usually get going pretty late, but I mean, how long has it been? It's been like 2 hours.
How much do you want to go? It's up to you. I mean, if you want to
out whenever you're done.
Yeah.
Well, as a way of showing that I'm not just trying to duck this, I'll say like 15 minutes to allow for more good debate, because I don't want it to seem like I'm running away.
No, I don't think you are. I think you did a good job. I want to.
You wanted the one-on-one. I get it.
I really did, and I feel like I should have done that. I'm sorry, Dustin. I was a little hard on you. I was hard on you. I'm sorry, buddy. I was a little, I'm just very frustrated. I'm very frustrated right now.
I would fucking be immensely frustrated.
Okay.
But there are certain ways you address things. I agree with you.
Okay. All right. So we're gonna give Cricket a try. I believe you've been watching the stream, Cricket, right? So keep track of this.
Give me one quick second. I want to be able to hear you through. I got to turn off the space heater in this place. I'm burning up.
Sure,
give me
please.
just a second. I'll tell you when I'm back.
Okay. Yeah. So we're gonna give you some space, Cricket, and he's giving us like 15 more minutes, right? So you gotta come at it hard, right? Don't.
I'll do my best.
Yeah. I believe in you. I believe in you, buddy. So yeah, in case you're just.
I believe in you too. All right, I'm back.
All right. Cricket, go at it.
Okay, so first I want to clarify exactly what your position is. Are you claiming that there just is no systemic racism today, or do you think that there is any?
Well, I think we got away from kind of the opening statement. I am more sympathetic to the argument that kind of the perpetual things that are attributed to systemic racism are largely the fault of not championing individual responsibility. I disagree with the rhetoric, which is more apologetic towards criminal behavior than actually addressing the criminal behavior in the first place. So that's like the are you more upset about an excessive use of force versus criminality? That was kind of what we started with. I believe that IQ or genetics have some role in determining certain traits which influence certain behaviors within certain contexts. And I What was? Say the question one more time.
I
You're
heard
jogging
all
my
of that.
memory.
I'm just asking, like, do you believe that systemic racism is still a thing?
Oh yeah,
at
yeah,
all?
that's what it was. Yes, but I take the contrarian, but also I think observably true thing that there is a anti-white systemic racism.
Okay,
Which
do
I
you
actually
believe
wanted
that
to
Well,
get
there
more
is?
into.
racism. That's just
Do you believe
racism.
that there
That's all
are
it is.
any examples of systemic racism that affect other ethnic groups besides white people, or?
Maybe not that I could like list off the top of my head, unless you're like saying like Jim Crow or like things that have existed in the past, which are pretty explicitly racist.
Okay, so like for example, like I know we've been talking about black people the whole time, right? So I'll just go in a different direction with this, right? So Native American people, right? We have laws that explicitly treat Native American people differently, right? Because like they're entitled to live on certain reservations depending on their ethnicity. Their reservations are governed by different laws, that kind of thing. Would you consider that to be systemic racism or no?
Um,
But those are treaties set up between the country and them to recognize their sovereignty.
Yeah.
not-
Regardless of that, do you consider it to be systemic racism? Because we are like putting people under a different legal regime depending on their ethnic group, right?
well, my understanding about the Native Americans is that they even have like their own tribal law in many of these places. Like,
Correct,
I don't think
yeah.
it's
So,
like
so they are under a different legal regime depending on their ethnic group. Yes.
well that they've chosen.
Whether they've chosen it or not, can we agree that they are living under a different legal regime depending on their ethnic group? Yes.
Sure, but I wouldn't qualify that as systemic racism.
Okay, so what's the difference? Like, why is that not systemic racism?
I think there needs to be okay. If we're speaking as far as connotation goes, systemic racism is used to describe something that is unpleasurable, or is something that is not agreed on, or is something that is used to disarm somebody without their consent. And I think the very explicit consent to having a tribal law or governing yourself is not systemically racist, at least in the sense of the connotation. I think if we're to define systemic racism, I would say it's the creation of kind of a separated class, either for the benefit or either for the reason of benefiting one group alone and not benefiting any other groups, or detrimenting certain groups alone and not applying the detriment to other people.
Okay, so a lot of I think it sounds like a big point of contention for you is whether they've agreed to it or not, right? Do I have that right?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll
So
say
a lot
that.
of these Native American groups, they're living under treaties that were either agreed to or were forced onto their ancestors, right? But not every like individual Native American person living on a reservation has agreed to that treaty that was signed 150 years ago, right?
Certainly, if this is the argument for systemic racism, I could basically say the same thing about taxes.
Okay, but let's not go on a tangent about taxes. I'm just trying to get to agree to the point that there are people living today in the United States under a different legal regime based on their ethnic group, which they have not personally agreed to. Yes?
Yes. And I think that within the context of like that like personal regime or like a tribal law that they may have not agreed to, I think when you're explaining it within that context, you can attribute it to basically anything else like taxation. Like not every American has agreed to these certain things explicitly. So I think it kind of falls through.
I mean, like whether they've agreed to it or not, though, you've essentially just described systemic racism, and then you're making comparisons to taxes and stuff, right? But
I don't think I've described systemic racism, though. I described
okay, I'm sorry.
systemic
Maybe
racism
you
when
just
I
need to tell me like
said
what
that.
do you think systemic racism is?
Well, I just did. It's that either connotationally, it's something that is, not good or harms individuals and is kind of forced upon them. Or the other one is that it's, creating kind of a reward or improving the life circumstance of a bunch of people and not giving that to anybody else, or detrimenting a certain group of people and then not, attributing the detriment to anybody else as well.
Okay, no, but I think the Native American reservations do fit exactly the description you've just given, because they do have higher rates of poverty, higher rates of crime, the lots and lots of disadvantages, and so, and that these are affecting people based on their ethnic group, and that those people didn't agree to them, right?
So the negative outcomes that are created by that qualify the existence of the system as systemically racist.
Yeah, so there you go.
No, I'm asking, but I disagree.
I'm sorry. I thought you.
No, sorry, I should have did more of an upswing at the end of that. But.
They do fit the description that you just gave of what systemic racism is, right?
Because there's an aspect, in my opinion, there's an aspect of intentionality. I don't think you need to be intentionally like. I think that the creation of certain tribal laws, which was coordinated, and you yourself admit that it was something that was agreed to by certain Native Americans. I believe that that was not something that was taken up under the attitude of systemic racism, or you would be arguing that those Native Americans have been systemically racist to themselves.
I do think it is possible for an ethnic group to be systemically racist to itself, but that's I think in a lot of the cases. Probably not. I think these are mostly.
So why are you using this as an example?
No, because these are because it fits the description that you gave of what systemic racism is.
Okay. It seems a little bit silly then. So you're trying to get me to say that the Native American reservations are systemically racist by kind of asking me for a definition that may fit it. But you and I both agree that the foundation, or rather the creation of tribal laws within these communities, were not systemically racist.
Oh, no, I don't agree to that. Because as a matter of fact, like these were agreements that were put on a lot of these tribes under duress. Like they essentially were herded
that's not
into
what we're referencing. The tribal laws that are being created, like I think there were a few more recently, those are being created with the input, or rather with the will of the Native American communities who found themselves in that place, right?
Okay, but the people who live there are subjected to those laws not by their own choice, but just by the fact that they were born into a different ethnic group, and therefore they're living under a different legal regime.
You're wrong. You're wrong. They are there. If you're a member of a tribe, you kind of have two choices, all right? You can live on tribal land, which is a recognized place of sovereignty, as in like a country within itself.
Yeah.
Those laws are set up by the members of the tribe within the nation.
And that's different from every other person in America.
That does not mean that they're not subject to the laws of America.
I'm not trying to argue about whether they're subject to the laws of America. I'm saying that they are treated legally differently than every other person in America.
By their choice.
Whether it's their choice.
Okay.
No.
We disagree here.
I think what he's so. And please correct me if I'm wrong. And what's up with your camera? I don't know what's going on with the camera.
It keeps shutting itself off, and I don't know why. Sorry.
Okay. All right. We'll just have to keep going. All right. So, correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't want to be putting words in your mouth. Cricket. You're saying that the systemic racism is coming from outside institutions, right? Unless you're saying it's coming from inside, but it sounds like what you're saying, the systemic racism part is coming from how the federal government interacts with those tribal governments, right? Like the fact that there's a tribal government that has certain laws is immaterial. It's more the fact that they were put on these reservations in the first place, right? Like that in itself is part of the problem. These reservations that, for instance, don't have not institutions.
Resources.
Doesn't have resources. Sure. Don't have running water and the whatnot, right? Things like that. And then how the federal government interacts with them, both historically and now. That's where the systemic racism is coming in. Is that what you're saying? Or maybe I just made that up because that's what I want to say.
I'm really confused. I'm confused because, like, if you would have said, like, creating reservations where certain people are like born and raised and they can't really get out of those situations, I'd see that as far more supposedly systemically racist than, oh, well, the U.S. government coordinated with like the Navajo leaders to create new tribal laws and to recognize their sovereignty, and it just ended up really being a sucky place. So now people need to suffer based off something that was a consensual agreement. Like that, I mean, that's not systemically racist to me. It's like you're suffering because the setup of the law was not really good.
Why would you think that was consensual? Like that being put on a reservation?
No, hold on. There's two things. The first, and that's why I made the distinction.
Okay.
The first was people being forced into that land, not consensual, right?
Okay.
The second, the creation of sovereign states while working with Navajo or whatever Native American tribe leaders, that is a consensual working with the United States government to recognize certain laws.
It's okay.
Like,
All right.
yeah,
All
well,
right.
how-
Cricket,
no,
how is
let
that?
Cricket-
How is
no,
that
no,
not consensual? How is that not consensual?
What? How is
because
how
the
is any-
individuals living there didn't all
how-
consent. to
How
it.
is
Okay,
well,
but
no,
not-
no, no. You're going to go down
So,
libertarian
wait,
argument.
wait,
You're going to go down
so
the
does
libertarian
that
argument.
mean-
You're going to
does
set
that
up
mean
the
that two
libertarians.
people- okay, yeah.
Okay,
Go
you're
ahead,
going to
go
set up libertarian argument that one.
Yeah.
No, the relationship between the Native Americans and the U.S. government has in no way ever been consensual. Not ever, right?
Well,
Like,
I think that's a rhetorical position.
no,
more
it's not
than it is-
rhetorical. No, it's absolute, right? Like the power imbalance there, that started with like the Native American slaughter.
Okay.
Like we have to work off that, like the genocide that was committed by this government to them, right? And then the denying treaties, right? Going back on those treaties again and again and again and again, right? All that stuff, like that means like there's a fundamental power imbalance. If the Native Americans had maybe a military that could compete with the United States, well then okay, maybe we could say that. But there was at no point in time when Native Americans have been able to decide what they want. If the Native Americans got what they want, right, then they would not be living in lands that were so incredibly impoverished and suffering the injustices that they do, right? Like,
Yeah, they'd be
So-
sitting
so-
here
yeah,
having
yeah.
an
So
immigration
well, hold
debate
on,
about
hold on,
whether
hold on,
white
hold on,
people
hold
should
on,
be able to
hold
live
on,
in their country
hold
at all.
Well, there's a few things. First of all, I think as far as people not living in the country at all, it's like war. You guys lost, and I don't mean that to be disrespectful, but if it's literally a conflict where you're willing to destroy entire civilizations, then kind of like there have been far worse things done to people who have been taken over. Entire civilizations have been killed during conquest
that's your
and war.
argument?
And no,
Wow.
look. I'm
Isn't
not
that
saying
racist as well?
oh my gosh. Okay. I'm not saying that it's like, well, I won't get into the tangent about like the war and about what goes during war versus otherwise. What I'll ask is like, you're saying which to an extent is true, is like, Native Americans have had this power imbalance with the United States. True. Okay. They've been forced into certain reservations, which are really not that nice. True. Okay. But it sounds like what you're saying is that if today Native American tribal leaders worked with the United States government and listed demands, which the United States government has now, become, or rather has now realized are politically popular to give, that it still is systemically racist to at all work with the United States government.
No, I'm
But
saying
no,
the-
that's not-
no,
that's
I'm
not-
saying
that's
the,
not what I
the
said.
differential
Okay. I just
conditions
wanted,
that they
I
live
want to make
under
sure
and
that that's not what you're saying.
I
Because
could-
I think if a tribal leader works with the United States government now and has demands that are met by the United States government, that's not systemic
Okay,
No,
racism.
I'm saying that they
I'll
live
let
under-
Cricket. I'll let Cricket take it over from here. Kai, we just have to do this one-on-one. You and
Okay.
I, mano a mano. Like we have to do this. I would love to do this with you, but Cricket, this is your chance, please.
Okay, I want to finish up this, and then I have a couple of questions that I want to do really quick before you're done. But okay, so no, the point of what I was saying was not that it is racist for tribal leaders to negotiate with the United States government.
Okay.
The point I was making was that the different conditions that Native Americans live under as a result of their ethnicity and ancestry, that amounts to systemic racism. And I'm including the legal regime in that, but it's not limited to the legal regime. It also includes their poorer economic conditions, all the kind of shitty stuff that happens on tribal land.
I disagree. I don't think the intentionality regarded race whatsoever. I think it regarded whoever was on the land and putting those people in different lands so that the United States could further manifest destiny. I think that had nothing to do with race, and more so you're in the place that we want and we're going to move you. And if, that group of people suffers certain effects, I don't think it's because of the race. I think it is felt by that race because of a technicality.
Okay, I mean, the laws that put those things in place explicitly refer to their race, though.
Well, I mean, what else are you going to call them? Like no, don't they refer to indigenous peoples? I mean, unless you qualify that as a race, I mean, that's just a reference to the people who are indigenous to certain land that you have through, military takeover conquered.
Okay,
That's
so
not a racial remark.
If there's systemic discrimination against indigenous people and you just don't want to call it racism, is that the position that you're at?
Yeah, I don't think it was racism. I think it was literally just war and conquest and pushing people into different lands so you could take over more of the land. I mean, I don't think it was a racial basis at all.
Okay, I'm content to move on to the next point. For that, I think we've got your opinion on that. So the next thing, if there's some kind of discrimination, institutional discrimination against something other than race, but that something happens to correlate with race, is that a thing that you would want to describe as systemic racism? Like,
No, no.
okay, so I think this is actually a big part of the contention between us is that that's a lot of what people are talking about when they say
Yes.
systemic or institutional racism. So, for example, if we have a legal system that discriminates against people that are less educated, and it just so happens that there's differences in educational attainment between different ethnic groups, then there's going to be a disproportionate impact, right?
Yes. And so when we were talking a little bit earlier, like for instance about crime, I don't think it is because of race. I think it's because of criminality, which is why I kept saying, if there was white criminality in the same way, I would be equally as unapologetic for, police brutality or anything like that. For me, it has more to do with the criminality. And if the criminality happens to be in one group, I'm less worried about whether it happens to be in one group and more worried about whether the criminality is happening.
Okay. Nevertheless, like I'm sure you'll recognize there are historical reasons why criminality differs between those different groups, right?
Hold on, say that one more time.
Okay. If there are statistical differences in criminality between different groups, would you agree that there are historical explanations for how that got to be the case?
They are arguable, but I would disagree likely. I mean, that's kind of been the subject of the conversation, is me disagreeing about that.
Okay, so I'm not arguing for a specific historical reason. I'm just saying, would you agree that there are historical reasons for why it is the case that for example, people of color now tend to live in higher crime neighborhoods? Just
Yes, if
any
I could say
reason.
historical, well, yeah, sure. And I think I'd attribute one of those to be like historical crime. I think historical crime is a reason why people don't really migrate out of certain areas, because crime's really bad for, being prosperous.
Okay, so if we just trace back those historical reasons, whatever reasons you think those are. So, for example, the historical crime, we could then take it another step back and say, like, well, why did the historical crime happen more often in neighborhoods with people of color, right?
Mm.
And then you could just keep going back and so.
Well, we talked about this. It's like the chicken and the egg. But I have made the argument that crime is the thing that precedes the poverty. You are impoverished because being in jail for committing crimes is a really bad thing, and it's not a good thing to be in jail. So you shouldn't have committed a crime, right? So that was my argument, and people can disagree with that, but I think I've been pretty consistent in that explanation.
Yeah, but I don't think you've. I mean, to some degree, you've said a little bit about why it is that you think people of color are committing crime at higher rates. I mean, you went into the thing about IQ, right? But there's going to be some. There's really only a couple different categories of explanations we can use for this. One of which is if you think that they're somehow genetically disposed to crime, and that could just mean that you think they have lower IQ genetically, and therefore, and low IQ people are genetically more disposed to crime, or it can have things.
Yeah, I think that's true. Lower IQ people are more disposed to crime as far as correlation goes. More crime is committed by low IQ people.
Okay, and would you attribute the difference in crime rates among ethnicities entirely to IQ, or
no, absolutely not entirely. And that's kind of been the big thesis of the statement, and why I was so not eager to jump into one train or the others, because I think there's a multitude of reasons, and I think a cultural argument is one of them. And I do think that, poverty is one of the things too. Poor white people tend to do really poorly as well. But like I said, kind of with the Native American thing, just because the consequences of poverty are felt more by one race doesn't mean that the poverty is racist.
Yeah, I mean, like, regardless of whether it's poverty or if it's some cultural difference, right? I mean, I think you'd probably agree that environmental differences between these groups are contributing a lot to the differential rates of crime. Is that right?
To an extent, but again, it's like the reason the environments are bad is because people committed crime in the first place.
Yeah, but if you're just saying people are committing crime because people are committing crime because people are committing crime, right? Like I'm
Oh, no,
like
that's
what's
not what I'm saying. I think there's a lack of responsibility. There's certain cultural things. Maybe you're born in a family where you're not taken care of. Maybe you have particularly high testosterone and you have low impulse control, and that causes you to commit crime. Then, you committing
so
crime is going to make you impoverished. And I think that people generally are in a fallen state where they tend to do things that are not good.
and
Sometimes
why
there's
are
not
those
always like
things?
this rational, like it's because of, because they're poor. Maybe it's just because people are often stupid, and the stupidity of people is going to lead to crime. And not everything can be attributed to the fact that they were born into, impoverished circumstance.
Right, but what I'm trying to get at is what's your proposed explanation for why all of those factors that you just named are different between different ethnic groups? Like, how do you explain the statistical differences in crime or in other outcomes? Because we could also talk about health,
Well,
and we could talk about homelessness, and a million of other things that are
I think
different.
I think I've kind of answered this, but throughout the course of the conversation, there's a variety of things. I think the culture, the glorification of violence within certain cultures versus within others plays a part in it. I think the correlation with lower IQs among Black Americans and the correlation to lower IQ and crime has a role in the disproportionality of the people who are committing crime. I think there's a variety of factors that play into it, and I think I've said that the whole time. Is there
Yeah,
like
yeah,
an
yeah.
answer that you want
This
me to
is the
give?
first
Well, no,
time that you brought
it's
up
just
culture, though, just to be fair.
Yeah, yeah, true,
okay.
true.
Okay, so if you want to say it's a difference in culture, then where does the difference in culture come from? Like,
Uh,
like
I don't know which way you want me to answer this, because I would say it's like from the people, like from their kind of experience. Like I don't know. Like I don't know how you want me to answer this. Are you saying
well,
like, well, people are born poor, so they rap about like poor things? Is that like what you want me to say?
no, I mean, I want you to just be honest about whatever your point of view is on the subject, so we can talk
Yeah.
about that. But I mean, essentially, if you want to say that cultural differences between different ethnic groups um, are impactful on those rates of crime between different ethnic groups, then I'm just trying to trace that back historically. Like, why do people of color, according to you, um, live in cultures that lead to more crime?
I'm a little
I'm
confused
a
about
little,
this too.
yeah, I'm a
Gotta be-
little.
This has got to stop. Everybody coming on here to like get him to reveal his power level bullshit. Right? If you're on the left and you want to have a conversation with somebody that you disagree with that has problems like these, you need to have questions that allow people to explain those differences as opposed to trying.
That's literally what I'm trying to do.
Stop this dog whistling horse.
There's
Well, you're
it,
Well,
pretty
I
fucking
think,
bad at
well,
it, brother.
if I can tell you what I think you want me to say, I think you want me to say is like the circumstance or their environment causes kind of like the a certain culture to take root, but then it gets back to, okay, well, what aided in the creation of the environment? Well, I think
Yes.
it's violence. I think it's very little responsibility, and I think a sense of responsibility is also something that can be to an extent heritable. I think it comes from family values, and I think to say like, well, how does culture exist? Well, it's like culture has existed forever. It's very difficult to trace that back to an origin point. So
I understand,
if you are to ask me where does culture come from, ultimately it comes from the differences among people. Different people create different cultures, and the cultures they create, manifest differently too. So that's the
like
ultimate
if you want
answer:
to
is
say,
culture comes from
for
people,
example,
and their culture starts to perpetuate certain parts of their identity.
yeah, sure. So if you want to say that there's like a difference in personal responsibility, for example, among ethnic groups, then it's just like, okay, why does this ethnic group have this difference? Well, it's because they had this other difference. And why do they have this difference? It's because they have all this other difference. And what I'm trying to get to is like, where do those differences stem from in terms of either genetics or environment, right? And I think your answer seems to be that to a large degree, like different ethnic groups are just genetically prone to different behaviors, but presumably their different historical circumstances have also contributed to the development of the cultures that they live in that are now having these outcomes. Yeah.
Yes, and I would add one more caveat, which is that I believe these different people with different genetics or whatever, have a role in shaping the environments that perpetuate their culture. I think there's a pretty noticeable difference between the black culture from, say, like prior to the 1960s and the black culture today in America. And I don't mean to make this like a whole like I hate rap songs because I like rap or whatever. But obviously, I think the displays of either violence or of criminality or things like this, or at least the acceptability of it within the black community, has certainly changed.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to get at is that stuff didn't just come from nowhere, right? It's like those differences arose because black people were already living in different circumstances at the time when that culture came about, right?
Okay, wait, hold on. Do you think black people are living in better circumstances now or in 1960?
Probably quite a lot better now.
Okay, so do you think the black community is doing better now versus 1960?
Yeah, better now, yes.
Okay, I would say it's probably degraded a lot from the 1960s.
Why do you say that?
I think there's a kind of general political aspiration. I think there was more of a community-oriented feeling within the 1960s. Obviously, you can point to certain things like the Family Act that Lyndon B. Johnson had. But I think generally, like looking at crime rates, looking at drugs, looking at all these kinds of things, the black community, I think, has degraded on all of these different issues, either on criminality or on drug use or on its acceptance of either of those things. More
so
or
the
less.
problem you're going to wind up
Crime rates are
having
quite a
there
lot
is
lower
that,
now than they were in the 1960s, by the way. But
well, the problem that you're
The
going to
crime rates generally or among black people?
both.
Yeah,
and do you think that if we
dropped.
and do you think if we controlled for general the general drop in crime rate, do you think that we would find that the drop in the black crime rate is paced the same?
To the best of my understanding, it's paced about the same.
I would probably disagree with that. And I think as well, we've seen within the last, few decades, the disappearance, or rather the situation that is, black fathers leaving the home. Some people attribute that always to crime, but I think that's happened more, within the last few decades.
Yes, and you would look at the systemic cause of that, which would be an increase in certain laws coming around the 1980s.
And which laws? Like the Great Society Act?
Well, no, that's not necessarily the laws that we're talking about, because the Great Society Act would come around in 1968 during LBJ.
Oh, yeah,
correct?
my bad. I got my years mixed
Right.
up. Which ones are you thinking about?
Well, the greatest attributing to our explosion in population in prisons, a drug war. Right?
The drug
so
war.
When you,
whoa, hold on.
Well,
I don't know, because
So
you're
when you
probably
have
better
an-
read on this. But I just want to ask
well,
something from my understanding of it.
Well, let me finish this before.
I have one more quick question before we're done. But yeah, go ahead.
So why you would want to sit there, and why I would caution you to sit here and say that times were better in the 1960s is because, well, yeah, of course they were. We had less laws that were more or less penalitative on people because less things were criminalized, such as LSD or marijuana was not criminalized in the same level as far as hard-hitting, extensive prison sentences and stuff along those lines. So when you point to those levels of criminality, and I think what Cricket is trying to get at, is that, yeah, of course, because we had less laws, so less sentencing, therefore more fathers in the home. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense, but I mean, to an extent. But you have to push back.
Everything's going to be to an extent.
Well, no, hold on. The reason I'm saying to an extent is because I want to push back on kind of the main thing, which is the claim that the drug war has really influenced negatively, like the black family. Like I find it just on the face to be a little bit weird to say that like fathers are out of the home now in the black community because they sell drugs and get caught for it now. Like I think that's a little bit weird to say. The other thing is that statistically, non-violent drug crimes especially, but drug crimes generally make up a very small minority of the reason for people being in jail right now. Like a very small portion of it.
Okay, I got one more.
No, that's like statistically true. It's like less than like 6%, I think. Non-violent drug crimes are a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of the reason for people being in jail right now.
And while I could possibly agree with you on that, what we're talking about is the stickiness of the system, right? As soon as you're touched or put on paper is what we typically call it, then, I like that little smile you just got because of this point, then you are inherently more likely to keep being reoffended or commit more crimes because you are noticed and disproportionately sentenced because of that initial mistake.
Wait, but I don't think that, like, that I don't think is a problem. Like, you get caught for committing crimes and you're more likely to get caught for committing other crimes. Like, if somebody's committed a crime
Right, but
and
what we're
people are
talking,
now
what
watching
the issue
them,
that you
so
had had
like,
is the issue that you had specifically is violent crime, correct?
well, I think all kinds of crime are a problem. Like, I think one of the most violent crimes is actually drug dealing. Like, I think that's one of the worst crimes there are. I think that, people who use drugs should largely be rehabilitated, but I think, the distribution of drugs is one of the worst things ever. But simple possession of certain drugs is, really not as felonious as people make it out to be. And despite,
It's not that
certain things.
it's not that it is today. What we are talking about is the implementation of those laws at that time.
I
doesn't
would be
have to be
surprised if
today.
even at that time it was a large reason for people being in jail for long periods of time. Like, that seems
And I
ludicrous
would-
to me.
And I would be surprised that if you're going to make an argument like things were better in the 1960s, that you wouldn't take into account a huge cultural shift towards drugs, a huge creation of an agency specifically targeting in areas where there are more drugs. That's why I would caution you. I know it's so annoying, but
No, I don't even
Why,
mean to
that's
say
what I
it that
think-
way. It's just
but
like,
that's what I would say that you would want to kind of take a look at that. I would also say, and I think this is more of a Vosh point than anything, that it's not necessarily that they're absent fathers. It's more a fact of those polls that are taken is just like no longer being married. They're pretty active fathers as far as like what I'm understanding as far as like a fatherless homes, for instance.
And I gotta say, I'm looking at this data. It seems like you're completely fucking wrong on this point about people who are locked up for nonviolent drug offenses, right? So 450,000 people are locked up, within all the state prisons, local jails, federal, and youth areas, like at any given date, according to the Prison Policy Initiative, right? But then you go to statistica.com. There's 1.22 million people, number of prisoners in the U.S. Currently. So that's more than 6%.
I think you're talking
wait,
federally.
hold on.
No,
Are you talking about the federal?
Yeah,
system?
I'm on the Prison Policy Initiative. As like they have this thing called the whole pie, mass incarceration, the whole pie. I actually was learning about this in school just last semester.
Okay.
And like, as a proportion of the whole pie, I can actually link it if you want it, or it should be easy to just look up. Prison Policy Initiative, mass incarceration, the whole pie 2020, whatever. It should come up. So there are within local jails, there is like, the drug crimes, it's 120,000 within, people who are convicted or for not convicted people, drug crimes are 120,000. It's kind of split pretty evenly between property crime, violent crime, and drug crime. That doesn't even take into account nonviolent drug crime as a proportion of people who are convicted. It's, a small slice of that too. When you're looking at state prisons, drug crime is like, I mean, I can't quite tell the metric there.
I mean, it's,
and then
I'm
drug
looking
possession.
on the prison policy, or on the prison policy
Yeah,
website.
so
right?
if you want to look at that, the one we're looking at is drug possession, right? Which would presumably be like a nonviolent drug crime.
No, like they have a thing on specifically on people who are locked up. 450,000 people are incarcerated for nonviolent drug offenses. 450,000 people.
Yeah.
So not
That's not at all the way it's been framed, though.
Hunt.
Like, not at all.
You said you were talking about the people who are incarcerated, right?
I like that little smile you
So
get.
we're talking about those who are incarcerated, correct? Like I brought up a statistic about the person.
Incarcerated, convicted for nonviolent drug offenses.
Okay,
Yes.
450,000.
On any given day. That's the line. Yeah.
Okay, great. And then how many are in total?
Well,
How
hold
many-
on. First of all,
You said
that's
6
incarcerated.
Yeah.
Not convicted.
Okay. So you're trying to make the distinction that some of them are in jail, like jail awaiting trial. Is that what you're saying?
Well, there's a few different things. So basically, the part that I was meaning to point out is that the incarceration for people for drug offenses is overstated, and that's right above what you're reading. There's that paragraph that says it literally, like it's titled, "Releasing non-violent drug offenders would end mass incarceration." It says, nevertheless, 4 out of 5 people in prison or jail are locked up for something other than a drug offense.
Yeah,
So
4 out of 5.
I mean,
yeah. One out, but
yeah.
one out of 5.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. So like generally, you're looking at about 20%, and of non-violent drug offenses, it is probably around 6%. So I may have phrased it incorrectly.
It is said.
It's like
So excuse me. 1 out of 5, right, is incarcerated people is locked up for a drug offense. 450,000 are incarcerated for non-violent drug offenses on any given day. Non-violent. That's
Okay.
the part. Not just drug offenses, not violent drug offenses.
Hold on.
Non-violent drug offenses, which is the category we're talking about. That is not 6% of the.
Okay, well, let's look at the statistics again, because again, this is like the headline. This is the big number. The part that they literally highlight within the paragraph is 4 out of 5 people in prison or jail are locked up for something other than a drug offense, either a more serious offense or even a less serious one. To end mass incarceration, we'll have to change how our society and our justice system responds to crimes more serious than drug possession. And then my claim, I may have said it incorrectly, but my claim was that as a proportion of drug offenses, which are only 1 in 5, I believe it's like as a total slice or as a total portion of the pie, it's probably about 6%, but and that's 6 of like the 20, right? So that part, yeah. And again, I kind of threw the 6% number from what I recalled. I might be wrong about that, but again, I am not at all wrong or, kind of misconstruing this when I say that the drug crime, epidemic that people talk about is really not the driver of mass incarceration the way that people say it is.
I think if you want to limit it to that argument, then I can find agreement with you, especially if we're talking about non-violent drug crime,
which is, by the way, supposedly the problem is the non-violent drug.
No, that's not the problem. That's not the problem.
Well, you guys may not frame it that way, but every single time I've heard the drug problem framed, it's always the non-violent drug possession.
No. That's,
and you guys have to understand that that's what's said. That's what's said.
No, I hear you, and we've if you live in exist in lefty space, then you're used to hearing that. No, that was not the problem. Exactly. The problem is a drug war in general, right? The only thing about the reason why people harp on the non-violent drug offense portion is because that's an easy thing to get newbies on, right? That's the politically appealing part, right? Oh, okay. Well, there's a group of people, right, who are in jail for just smoking some weed or whatever, right? And then you can frame the drug problem as a health issue and all that, and saying we should be helping these guys. They've done nothing else but smoke weed or maybe done cocaine or whatever the fuck, right? And rather than incarcerating them, we could have them being functioning members of the societies because those people are sympathetic. But the problem isn't that. The problem is the larger drug war in general, right? You say, hey, let's talk about non-violent drug offenders because that's easy. That's just something to make allies for, like reach across the aisle for. But that doesn't mean that in itself is the problem, right? The problem is the drug war in its totality. Do you agree with that? Or at least that's the way that
I agree with your characterization. Yes.
Okay, fair enough.
By the way, I think the 15 minutes are about up.
Okay.
Can I do one quick thing before we're done?
Yeah, sorry. You just got in here and you've hardly talked at all. I feel kind of bad. But yeah,
okay, so you were saying earlier that that if we discriminate on something else that isn't race but that correlates to race, that you would say that that's not racism? And
I wouldn't call it systemic racism, no. I think that the intentionality of it is an important part.
Okay, so if we talk about some of these historical examples there have been historical examples of people intentionally doing that. This is with like literacy tests and poll taxes and that kind of thing, like discriminating against people on education, knowing that Black people were less educated and therefore they were trying to like disenfranchise them from voting, for example. So could we agree that those are historical examples of systemic racism, even though they did not explicitly refer to anybody by race?
Well,
They
I think there's a few different things. Like there were mechanisms, especially within the South, where it was like it was further than just literacy tests. Like there were like really, really active efforts to stop Black people in particular from being able to vote. I think the literacy
yeah.
tests in themselves, no, I wouldn't call those systemically racist.
Okay. Would you agree that those were purposely used to disenfranchise Black people?
Yeah, and the way it was implemented, yeah, I would say that. But I would say, like, by the definition, no, I wouldn't call it systemically racist. And I would actually say, like, this is something I talk about. To me, what I'm concerned about is making sure that, really intelligent, civic minded, good people are going to vote. So, for me, like, it seems really easy to say, like, if you don't know how to read, you shouldn't be able to vote. But part of it is also, I think that everybody should be able to read. It's just kind of the argument that we want people who are willing to do more to be able to vote. So I take basically the opposite position of mass democracy. I think that there's kind of natural aristocracy and people who are more inclined to vote. Like if you're not going to vote because they don't allow 24-hour drive-in voting, you probably shouldn't be voting because you think it's more of a flippant, negligible thing.
Okay, I'm just going to suggest that those literacy tests do actually meet the definition that you gave earlier of systemic racism, because the people that were affected by them did not consent to them. They were being disproportionately badly affected by them, and they were being used to intentionally affect a certain group.
Okay, well, so with the third thing, which is like, the intentional thing, that's why I said that with the implementation in the South, in particular, it was kind of systemically racist because there were more efforts being taken to stop Black people from voting. But I think that the literacy tests in and of themselves are not systemically racist as far as just like the literal way they're written out.
Like it
being
is
able
possible to have a literacy test that's not systemically racist, but I'm just talking about the specific historical implementation of them in the United States.
And that is what I said was systemically racist by citing exactly how it was done in the South, which I think went further than just requiring that people know how to read.
Okay. I mean, essentially, you did answer the question then. I'm done.
Okay.
Perfect. All right. Well, I think I'm out of here too.
So, Kai, yeah, I want to thank you for being so kind as to come on here. I had a really good time with you. The content doesn't end on my end. We're going to have a walk on panel. If you guys want to be a part of that, right? Jump on, maybe talk about what happened here and all that stuff, right? Now that's the time, right? If you guys been chomping at the bit and you didn't get a chance to come on, that's great. But Kai, again, thanks for coming on. First of all, where can people find you? Like I want people to people, yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You're going to get a lot of crap for platforming me and even telling me that I can tell people where to find me. But you can find me on cozy.tv/Kal.Clips, where I do my show Out of Touch, named after the Hall & Oates song, and also as a metaphor for the right wing and technology and whatnot.
I love Hall & Oates. I love
Let's go. Let's go. Let's freaking go.
Kai, I'm really looking. Thank you for being here, man. I'm really looking forward to the 1-on-1 on you guys. With Prime.
We need to have 1v1, right? I don't allow anyone. Way. I think we'll have a good time discussing that. And fuck everyone else, right? I platform who I want, right?
Let's
like
go.
It,
Let's go.
To be here, all right? So thank you so much,
you're telling truth to power. Let's freaking go. Yeah. The white liberals can't hold you down.
Goddamn right.
That's epic. Well, I'm gonna get out of here. Thanks for having me, man. Yep. And Dustin, good to talk to you, especially. You're by far probably the most palatable leftist I've talked to. You too, Prime. You're a very good moderator. Almost as good as this guy I know, Beardson Beardley. He's really good too. He does Politically Provoked. So good to talk to you guys. Adios.
Have a good one. Bye.